across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello there, my lovely things, and sorry yet again for abandoning you on Friday in the last week. Well, if you tuned in last week, you saw me gallantly present live for 3 hours, only to go home and feel like I'd been washed up on some sort of deserted beach, some, bestraggled manatee feeling very sorry for herself, green at the gills, exhausted with extreme vertigo. But hey, look, I'm well again. I'm back. I'm fighting fit. Well, not quite, but I'm no longer skiving off is the most important thing. So thank you ever so much for your patience. And people who sent me well wishes and advice on how to get rid of labyrinthitis or at least deal with it. You have no idea. I lay in my sickbed scrolling through comments on X. Any little bit of information. Someone saying, have you tried the Epley maneuver? Roll from this side, do that. Someone else saying you can do this head massage like this. Other people saying drink this, take that supplement. I was across the lot of it. And most of the time I was praying for my own recovery because it was the most ghoulish thing I've ever had in my life, and that's not an exaggeration. And believe me, I have been in the wars. Now, talking about wars, that is the big story of today, isn't it? What went on in that phone call between Putin and Trump, a long phone call, is what we understand. We've got a few scant details. There's a big NATO summit going on at the moment. Pete Hegseth, the US Defense Secretary, newly inaugurated into that position, is currently speaking in Brussels. So we're going to be finding out what America's saying versus what Europe is saying, and find out what you are saying as well, because, well, it's a pretty divisive topic. And if you want to let me know your thoughts on that, or indeed anything else that we talk about today on the show, you can. This is the place to share and share alike. This is where kind, commonsensical people get together for communal catharsis. The number to dial is 0344 499 1000. You can make that cheeky little phone call anytime you like and register your interest to speak to me in the studio, and one of my crack team of expert producers will give you a call back when the time is right. You can also use the exact same number to send me a WhatsApp message, or indeed leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. I really do like those, because it's just like, it's almost like having a mini 30-second holiday. Just press a button and off you go. And I'm not the presenter anymore. You're doing it instead. 0344 499 1000 is the number on WhatsApp. 87222 is the number if you want to text. Now, here's an important detail about the old SMS route. That is, you have to write talk before your message. And do you know what? I actually found out why today. I've always said, haven't I? It pings the masts on top of talk towers. Well, transpires we share our towers with various other outlets in the News UK stables, including Times Radio. And I happen to be tuned into Times Radio by accident, of course, driving home from Gloucestershire earlier on. And theirs is the same number. 87222, but you have to put times for them. So that makes sense. That's why we have to put talk. Otherwise, you're going to be speaking to some sort of centrist dad sitting in a booth 3 floors below when you want to speak to me. 87222 on the text, talk before your message, and then whatever you want to say. We're also on X at talkTV. OK, shall we get on with getting on and speak to our very first guest, the wonderful, inimitable Andrew Fox, defence expert, former paratrooper and research fellow at the Henry Jackson Society of Foreign Affairs think tank. Andrew, great to have you back on the programme. It's been a while, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was your Christmas show last time. You were all done up like Santa. So, yeah, it's been a good month off.
Well, less so now. I'm sort of grey and miserable looking today. Much like the weather outside, I'm toning in. OK, let's just get straight to this. What are your thoughts on what Trump had to say about his long phone conversation with Vladimir Putin? Trump made clear from the beginning he wants to go for peace, essentially. He wants to end that war, saying that the talks to end that war could start immediately, and saying that, of course, Zelensky is invited to those talks. Is this a good idea? Is this appeasement?
Yes, it is. It's absolutely appeasement. It's another great example of how Mr. Trump's transactional style on the world stage just doesn't take into account second and third order effects. And I find it deeply curious that he's prepared to bully Canada and Mexico with threats of tariffs. and yet the Russians seem to get away with a free pass. I find that a very curious element of Mr. Trump's style. Overall, I think it's very gracious and generous of him that he should invite Mr. Zelensky to peace talks. Very thoughtful. But I have deep concerns about the second and third order effects here and where Europe goes, particularly from a security perspective, from this point onwards.
Now, I was sent a clip from somebody today pointing out Nigel Farage had said, well, look, if this is going to be the negotiation, he is, of course, a dear friend of Donald Trump. Perhaps the solution is that in return, Ukraine immediately becomes a member of NATO. Let's have a listen to that clip, actually.
I don't want to prejudge how these negotiations go, but I would have thought that if we're going to get Putin into a place and Zelensky into a place where we can have a reasonable negotiation, I would have thought, looking ahead, it's probably essential that Ukraine joins NATO. That's going to need to be part of this negotiation.
I mean, does that soften it a little bit? Let's imagine that in this negotiation, they say to Trump, right, you get Donbass. Not Trump. Trump says to Putin, right, you get Donbass, that's it. And he says to Zelensky, and you get to join NATO. I mean, at the end of the day, it has become a war of attrition. And this has been grinding on now for a number of years at the cost of billions of pounds, stroke dollars, stroke euros, stroke whatever. Tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of lives, probably close to 1 million lives, actually. And, well, everyone wants to see some sort of resolution. And it seems to me Putin's probably not going to say, OK, I'll just stop and I don't want anything. Like, how do we build that golden bridge towards peace?
Yeah, and we can track back over the last 3 years and look at the litany of mistakes and errors of judgment that have been made, not arming Ukraine enough or fast enough. The Ukrainians themselves making a mess of their big summer offensive. And now here we are, as you say, in a war of attrition where Ukraine, frankly, as things stand, can't win. So in terms of wanting peace, they don't really have a huge amount of choice. When it comes to what Russia are going to be offered, it's going to take a huge amount of incentive for them not to try and stay in Crimea, Luhansk, Donetsk, and keep all of those regions, having successfully taken them from the Ukrainians. And I suspect the corollary to getting them to withdraw from anywhere will be that Ukraine doesn't join NATO. Much as I'm a fan of the idea, I think that will be a red line for Putin when it comes to signing any kind of a deal. And so we're looking at a far more dangerous situation of not only European peacekeepers on the ground without the umbrella of NATO Article 5 to protect them should Russia recommence hostilities. But we also have now serious questions over the whole future of NATO if this doesn't happen. If we can't rely on America, is there any point in NATO? And it's it's going to be a really big security question for European leaders to answer, both in terms of how they cooperate with each other going forward and how much they spend on defence.
I mean, is there a possibility, though, that because I had heard from someone who's a very close friend of Donald Trump, and I'm not talking about Mr. Farage, talking about somebody else who happens to be one of Trump's best friends, who said to me in confidence, look, don't get me wrong, he's on the side of Ukraine. He is not on the side of Putin. He is very much on the side of Ukraine, but he also wants to be remembered for peace and wants this to come to an end. Could there be a possibility that, that they may not be able to keep what would be strategically vital coastal positions in terms of controlling ports? We've seen how that was war-gamed a lot during this particular war. The control of fertilizer, wheat, all coming out of the south coast of Ukraine, which caused, in a large part, global inflation. But perhaps they do manage to hold on to the Russian language part of Ukraine, the far east bits, the Donbass and the like. And then perhaps there could be some sort of military pact between America and Ukraine where Trump then says to Putin, right, you have that, but you do anything else and we're going to be on to you. We're not going to hold back. Is that possible?
I mean, yes, but it wouldn't make a great deal of sense. Because if that's the case, well, why isn't America weighing in on Ukraine's side now? Why haven't we seen NATO air power in the skies to wipe the Russians off the battlefield, which would be the inevitable result of us chipping in fully on the side of Ukraine? So the idea that you can say we're not going to back you now whilst you're in the middle of a war, but we will back you in future should that war restart seems to ring a bit hollow to me. And I think Mr. Trump's not on Ukraine's side. He's not on Russia's side. He's on the America First agenda side. He's on Donald Trump's side. And my great concern about that, this kind of withdrawal from American security commitments, is that this has happened twice before in history, and both times we've ended up in a world war. So when we look back over history and the precedent, this kind of appeasement approach to dictatorships and authoritarian states has led to in the past. I think this is worrying, and I think it is a bad thing for Europe and the world more generally. We've got to think about what this means for China as well. They will see us placating authoritarian dictatorships, and they have very well articulated designs on Taiwan. Which is clearly also under the American security umbrella. So the knock-on effect of placating Putin right now could lead to even more conflict further down the line.
I mean, I think Donald Trump has been very clear that he wants his legacy of being that of peace. He wants to be the person who sort of has statues made as the great diplomat and being able to strong-arm other sort of, tough-talking world leaders into backing down and getting his own way for the greater good of the world. Do you think the Europeans are going to be able to convince him that actually standing up to Putin and throwing US weight behind Ukraine would be the solution? Because it's been a bit of a sort of a divisive electoral issue over in America. Many of the Republican Party are pretty much against wading in and helping out Ukraine. And we've both sort of said it is already a war of attrition. When someone asks me my opinion on this, I just say I really don't know anymore. What I do know is I don't think that Putin should be able to have much at all, if anything. But I don't know how to make the man stop.
Yeah, I mean, I suspect this is kind of already done. I think Mr. Trump will already have a very good idea of what Vladimir Putin will accept in exchange for a ceasefire, and we all have to wait and see what happens. But yes, of course, Trump does see himself as this peacemaker. But if we look at how his deals over the last 4 years of Trump and how the current ones are going, it simply shows that whilst authoritarian states are playing chess, Mr. Trump is playing hungry hippos. He isn't in the game at all. We look at the Abraham Accords that disregarded Palestinian statehood and led us directly to 7th of October. We look at the peace deal that he negotiated in Doha with the Taliban that led to essentially a withdrawal and a complete surrender to the Taliban and a complete abandonment of Afghanistan and our allies. We look at what he's doing in Gaza now, where he's simply making the situation more complicated with heavy-handed threats that are putting Hamas into a corner where it reduces the chance of peace and hostages being released. This kind of blundering transactional approach that he takes has time and time again backfired because he hasn't looked at what might come next. And that's my biggest fear, that he's going to repeat that pattern in Ukraine.
What do you think does need to be done? I mean, in an ideal world, would it essentially be NATO going into Ukraine, going above Russia and essentially potentially starting a big conflict?
Well, that's the issue. And I think we can't undo the mistakes of the last 2 years. And that's what's led us to this point where we are today, where Ukraine is going to have to make concessions. It doesn't mean that I'm particularly happy about it, but unfortunately there are a chain of events that have led us to this point. But I do think perhaps the threat of force is something that Putin might understand. He seems to be of that strongman mentality where he respects force and he respects power. But what I don't think is right is a ceasefire deal under any circumstances whatsoever. So we don't know the details yet, as Mr. Farage said in the clip you just played. We don't want to situate this and try and assume that we know how the outcome's going to go. But we do need to be, I think, very careful about giving Putin too much so that he can claim some kind of a victory in Ukraine.
The problem is Putin's going to, say he's been victorious, whatever, isn't he? He's not going to turn around and say, I lost this one. I think that's not part of his sort of egocentric personality. Pete Hegseth talking at the NATO summit in Brussels. Top line that I'm seeing is he's essentially saying that Europe has to spend more on defence. I mean, that's fair, isn't it?
No, I don't think it is, actually, because only 8 countries in NATO are failing to make the 2% that they've promised. Those are countries like Spain, Italy and Slovakia. Even if they made 2%, it wouldn't be a huge contribution to the overall effort any more than it really is now. And the really obvious point here is that nobody else has the spending power of America. It is the world's only global superpower. It spends more on defence than the next 10 countries put together. We cannot expect Europe, which is not doing well economically, to suddenly find trillions of dollars to try and replace the security umbrella that America has promised and has given us since 1945. So yeah, you can say people aren't spending enough, but when we're talking about percentages, it's a tiny percentage. It's a tiny overall whole, so 2% is a tiny amount. When we talk about America, 2% is an enormous amount of money. So we can't really, I don't think, expect European nations to spend money they don't have. Now, that doesn't mean we can't do more, and it certainly means, I certainly think that we should do more, particularly in the UK, where our armed forces are in an absolutely parlous state, and Poland give us a really good model of how to modernise and grow your armed forces to a size that make them meaningful. But to say that we should somehow try and find a parity with the United States just isn't going to happen.
Do you think we've got a bit of a problem in Europe that we always expect America to want to run in and help us? First World War, Second World War. We expect the United States, because they're essentially our cousins. It was, a landmass that was then inhabited by Brits and Dutch and so on and so forth. We kind of expect them to want to come and help us, and yet we're always a little bit dismayed when it takes them a long time to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, both those occasions, World War I and World War II, as I alluded to, were preceded by periods of this American isolationism that we're about to see again under Donald Trump. So that's a concern for me. But there's a very kind of a very obvious point to make here, and that is that America has been hugely enriched by the security umbrella that it's given the world. It's not out of the goodness of their hearts. It's not out of generosity or the fact that nobody else would do it. If we look at that real boom period in America, the 1950s and 60s, that was almost entirely due to trade and the fact that the world was buying American products, was investing in America because the world had the freedom to do so, empowered by an American security blanket as the world's dominant benign superpower versus a malign superpower in the USSR. So it's not as if America isn't getting anything from making the world a more peaceful, a better protected place, because they have, profited from that enormously.
Just a small aside here. I've just come back from Gloucestershire. I've been a couple of days where I hail from, and reading the local press there's all sorts of, twitchers and plane spotters who lurk around looking at all the great machines going into military air bases. And one of the big headlines I read was that US Air Force bombers have been flown into various air bases in that neck of the woods, but these aren't for routine exercises, and this has been preceded by various other smaller planes, which are the ones who sort of carry payloads or whatnot to furnish the big bombers, things like the B-52s, if they go out on active duty. Can we read anything into that?
I mean, I don't have enough detail on that to really make a comment. I mean, there are certain things around the world I can see happening. Potentially a strike on Iran has been talked about. They are weaker than they have been in 20 years. If we're going to get rid of their nukes, then now is probably the time. Whether it is a good move or not, I'm not sure, because, again, second and third order effects. What happens if we do that? We need to really game that through and make sure we've properly understood the ramifications. Maybe it's for the threat that I talked about, where they might threaten to flex NATO air power against Putin should he not agree to a ceasefire deal. It's possible, but this is all just conjecture at this stage. Those are the only two real fronts that I could see air power of that size and scale being used right now.
Yeah, how this plays out is anyone's guess. Andrew Fox, always great having you on. Thank you so much for your expert opinion. Right, we're going to take a short break now, but don't go anywhere. When I come back after the break, it's my good old Gloucester chum, a partner in crime, James Price. We're going to be talking about some of the big political stories of the day. Back after this.
Donald Trump had 2 goes. He sort of worked out.
The second go seems to be going
over
better
his
than
first
the first
term,
go.
and the second term he had 3,500 people ready to go. Look at the amount of taxpayer money that's being spunked up against the wall.
Yeah.
They're going to cut that off. They're going to stop it. They're going to make sure that's redirected into what I would call as a vibrant, accountable private sector.
Yeah. One shot.
That's what we need.
4 years. One shot, 4 years. Nigel Farage, is he going to be the Prime Minister, yes or no?
Well, at the moment, he's got every chance of being the Prime Minister. I mean, we're leading the polls and he's leading reform.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Right, some of your messages now. Paul in Dorset says, if France invaded us 2 years ago and the American president said, give France Kent and the war will stop, would you agree? Well, no, I blooming well wouldn't. But at the same time, if almost 1 million people had died in my country because a war had been dragging on as a result of this for a couple of years, and I was extremely war weary and think the country's going broke, I might be a little less resolved in that conviction. I don't know is the answer. I do not know. Simon in Devon says, what's being forgotten here is that the money Ukraine received from Europe and America has been given in the form of loans, the total being around $400 billion. So it's not just land that Ukraine will be giving up, it will be asset stripped anyway. It will be land grabbed by all and sundry. So it can't carry on like this for Ukraine. Money is now the main player in this, as I guess it always is. And it's interesting, isn't it? We talk a lot about the sort of military-industrial complex. You know, if America did decide to enter the battlefield, so to speak, and arm Ukraine, is there a big sort of aerospace and weapons sector that pockets a lot of cash and then that gets taxed and America ends up strangely getting money from this? Some might think perhaps they're concerned about escalating things. We don't know, do we? What's happened in that conversation? I think that Donald Trump often plays at counterpoints to what he says publicly, what he says privately. We don't know what the contents of that conversation were. He's made it clear from the beginning he wants to try and broker some sort of peace deal. I said earlier to Ian Collins at the outbreak of this conflict, there were all sorts of people talking about, well, the thing is about Putin, he's like a cornered rat. When you threaten him, he's like a cornered rat. He lashes out. You've got to make him a golden bridge. That's what they all said. Now, the same commentators, I hear them, popping up on all the channels going, ooh, this is terrible. This is appeasement. So when is a golden bridge not appeasement? I don't know. I'm not the expert when it comes to how one unravels such a horrific war of attrition. Do I want to see it end? Of course I do. I don't think anyone wants to see wars dragging on and multiple people losing their lives. We forget, we have this idea that these are people who, these are two armies fighting each other. But it's not. It's ordinary men from Ukraine who've been forced into conscription to defend their country. By and large, it's probably ordinary men in Russia who've also been told, get to the front line or X, Y, and Z. North Koreans being dragged into it. What on earth's going on there? What we do know is that country is being torn apart in certain regions and for what seems to be nothing. It's just sort of like stalemate constantly. I do agree with what Andrew Fox was saying earlier, which is we didn't do enough at the outset of all of this. And I point my finger of blame, believe it or not, I'm sure you can, at the EU. Because frankly, it was the EU and their, we're going to have joint foreign policy, we're all going to decide on things together, that didn't run to back Ukraine. Germany took 6 months before it agreed on Germans' weapons that have been sold to other countries like the Czech Republic to actually be allowed to be sold to Ukraine because Germany has to sign it off. You had a load of European countries going, yeah, do you know what, we still want to buy his gas. We're not so sure about those sanctions. We better mild them down a bit. It might harm us. So it was an absolute lily-liveredness from Europe at the start of all this, which allowed so much progress to be made when actually, when Putin first went in, it didn't work out, did it? He didn't manage to take Kiev in a day. It actually didn't work out for him. If we had been stronger and harder then, Britain was. I don't often praise Boris Johnson, but Britain was. Perhaps if everyone else had been on the same page as us, we could have resolved things. I don't know. Coulda, woulda, shoulda. Let's listen to a voice note now from Steve.
On Donald Trump trying to broker peace with Russia and Ukraine, right? The fact of the matter is, no one gives Donald Trump a fair crack. Like your last guest on there, Andrew Fox, he mentioned the Afghanistan withdrawal. Well, that bungled withdrawal, that was down on Biden. That wasn't Trump. He messed that up. Fact of the matter is, most people, if Trump was to put out a fire, they'd have a go at him for water damage. Never give him a fair crack.
Well, there you go. Plenty of opinions flying around there. Keep them coming in. Right, we're running a bit over schedule, but I'm pleased to say that the patience of Gloucester people, like good old James Price, knows no end, because he's been waiting this whole time to talk to us about today's big political stories. James, how are you doing, my babber?
Been too long, my friend. How are you?
I'm right. Just come back from the Shire. I have just earlier today. Lovely down there. Oh, it's nice. Right, now, let's talk about some of this mad stuff, including this ridiculous story of a Nigerian woman who tried and failed 8 times to secure asylum in Britain, finally granted the right to stay after joining a terrorist organisation. Now, this isn't an Islamist terrorist organisation. This is separatist organisation for the indigenous people of Biafra, which is considered a terrorist organisation in Nigeria, but not prescribed over here. And even the judge, who said, well, I suppose I'm going to have to let you say, said, I don't really believe that you're properly in this terrorist organisation. You've only just joined them a minute ago. All the other claims for asylum were nothing to do with this. What is going on with judges in this country? Why are they making these calls?
It's an amazing question, and I fear that the answers will only depress people even further. We've had a pretty solid week of questions like this about just completely baffling stories. You know, people may have heard earlier on in the week, and I'm not making this up, that somebody was allowed to stay because their son didn't like foreign chicken nuggets, even though this was a foreign criminal. They didn't like foreign chicken nuggets, so that they would have to therefore stay in the UK with their father, even though he was a criminal who was supposed to be deported. And now, to top it off, you've got a scenario where, as you say, a terrorist is allowed to stay, not in spite of them even being a terrorist, but because they're a terrorist. To answer your specific question about this, I think the reason why this has happened is that, you know, you've had, as inept as my party was in too many ways inside government, you at least had, at any one time, 100 Conservative ministers, 100 Conservative special advisors trying desperately to fight back against the tide of mad activist lawyers, as well as the blob of the civil service and all these sorts of things. Now you've got a mad, loony lefty lawyer as Prime Minister in Sir Keir Starmer, and his best mate, a man, Lord Hermer, who I think has been described by Robert Jenrick as Jeremy Corbyn in a barrister's wig. These are loony lefty lawyers who can see that it's open season now. All these people coming in and with these mad claims, because they know that Starmer's whole career before entering Parliament was based on the idea that international law was more important than any kind of national law or anything like that. And that therefore, if Starmer is to really speak up against any of this stuff, it's a kind of tacit acknowledgement that his whole career to this point has been a waste of time, if not a complete lie.
But he did say, in all fairness to him, yesterday in Parliament, when asked about another ruling by another judge about a Gazan family who wanted to come and claim asylum in the United Kingdom under the Ukrainian resettlement scheme, and this judge said, yes, you can. He did say on the floor of Parliament, I don't agree with this verdict. We're going to look into closing the legal loophole to stop this from happening. I mean, is it just a legal loophole, or is it the case that actually under Blair's plans to create Supreme Courts and ECHRs and all the rest of it, Parliament just doesn't have any sovereignty on this stuff, and actually more drastic action needs to be taken?
It's an absolutely outrageous attack on the rule of law that Keir Starmer has done, isn't it? And that's what they were saying about all of those of us who cared about the people's vote to vote for Brexit a few years ago. You remember all this? Any attack on the judiciary, an attack on the rule of law, and all these leftists were getting on their high horse and doing this. And now Starmer, because he's forced by the sheer insanity and the political reality of all of this as well, to say, as you said, that some of this stuff is going just a tad bit far now. He doesn't actually probably believe that, because he thinks that international law is more important than the British Parliament and than British law and things like that. But, you know, this is the kind of complete hypocrisy we've got to. I think it's useful for people to think back to, you know, we could go as far back as you want, but something like the Civil War. There was a big war that was fought here about the supremacy or otherwise of Parliament, and through There's the Civil War, the Restoration, the glorious settlement in 1689, all that sort of stuff. We've got to a point where Parliament is sovereign. It's not like in the United States where there's separation of powers between the judiciary or the legislature or the executive. No, it's Parliament that's supposed to be sovereign. And the vote for Brexit, that idea, in normal people was to take back control, was exactly that. And yet it hasn't happened, because although we're outside the European Union, as you say, we're not outside a lot of this ECHR nonsense, because Tony Blair put it into British law. So that's got to be scrapped out. And all these other stupid treaties and things that this kind of blob will keep us tied to. And let's be clear that all of these people, they don't give a fig for the British national interest. That means they don't give a fig about what it's like in the town that you're listening to us talking in right now. They don't care about your kids' education. They don't have to care about your healthcare or the quality of the roads or how safe the streets are or any of that stuff. All they care about is adhering to what a bunch of mad international lawyers think. And, let's talk about this Chagos Island thing again, right? But that's the one that's getting people very exercised. This idea that Labour if they say we have to give away our own sovereign territory with that American naval base on it and give Mauritius 18 billion quid for the pleasure of taking it off us. And which is the international court that said we had to do that? That's right. It's the one that's been stuffed by people by Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping. It's crazy talk.
It's mental. No, it really is. I just can't get over it. Especially, the more and more rulings I see coming out of this country and the courts of this country, judges are a big problem. Let's quickly talk now about Rachel Reeves. She's been investigated over expenses back in her banking job. This was when she was with Halifax Bank of Scotland, HBOS. She was apparently being quite cavalier when it came to her expenses, funding a lifestyle of dinners, events, taxis and gifts. Apparently she used company expenses to buy handbags, perfume, earrings and wine. And as a result of this, she was actually investigated by internal auditors at the request of the bank's risk department. And this woman's now running the blimmin' country's economy. You can't make this stuff up.
Extraordinary, isn't it? In a way, it almost makes me like her in some funny, twisted way. Like, she actually has some kind of personality. Anybody that fiddles expenses to go and buy bags and all that kind of stuff, have a good time. You called her a bit cavalier. I wrote a piece once that called her Reeves the Roundhead because she seemed so desperate to ban fun for everybody. We talked about the Civil War just now. But you're right, this is ludicrous. And this is sort of what happens when people fiddle with their CVs. I'm sure everybody's done it to some extent. It was what she said. She worked at the Bank of England for a decade. It turns out it was 5 years. So, everything she says, she can't do her maths at all on the simplest points. And lo and behold, it's being borne out by the fact that her budget a few months ago has been absolutely disastrous. And although technically the economy has avoided recession as announced today, it grew by 0.1%. The American economy has grown by hundreds of times that or something, on what economists would call a per capita basis. So based on how many people are in the country, it's shrunk. So we're in a kind of personal recession, as the Taxpayers Alliance campaign group are wisely calling it. And that's probably because we've juiced the economy with huge amounts of very low-skilled migration to just about avoid this technical recession and spare Rachel Reeves from probably getting the sack any day now. But can we trust her to turn this around? It's not just the silly things about buying, what was it, handbags and nonsense.
Yeah, the mad thing is about the handbags, perfumes and the earrings. She didn't even buy them for her. She used the company's expenses to buy sucky-up gifts for her boss. It's just mad. The woman's an idiot.
Right now she'll be using taxpayers' money, the people who are listening at home and watching this as well. She'll be using that to try and appease Keir Starmer. Or will it be appeasing all the international lawyers, just like her boss is trying to appeal to these people? Let's not forget, there is no such thing as government money. As Mrs. Thatcher once said, there is only taxpayers' money.
Maybe that's why they
needed... All this money's backed up the wall, it's yours.
Well, exactly. Maybe this is why they needed Lord Ali so badly, to keep Reeves' hands out the till for the shopping expenses for clothes. James Price, thank you ever so much. Former government spad. Right, it's going to take a short break now. When we come back, we're going to be updating you on what looks like a horrific terror attack in Munich again in Germany after a car ploughs into protesters.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello there. Welcome back to the show. I'd like to say I was surprised when I heard news coming out of Germany earlier today that yet another what appears to be terrorist incident has taken place. This time in Munich, a 24-year-old Afghan asylum seeker has been arrested after an attack after a car was driven into a crowd of people, leaving at least 28 people injured. The perpetrator was driving a Mini Cooper, rammed into a group of protesters from Verdi, which is the main trades union for Germany's public sector. They were out there protesting for more pay. Sadly, children among the injured. Pictures from the scene show a pram strewn across ground alongside other debris. Local reports are saying one woman has been killed. This is yet to be confirmed by police. It comes a day before the start of the Munich Security Conference, where world leaders are going to be meeting in the city to discuss, I don't know, open borders. Maybe that should be on the agenda. Let's have a talk now to Ralph Schulhammer, political theorist, head of the Centre for Applied History at the Matthias Corvinus Collegium in Budapest. Ralph, great to have you back on the programme. Is this like the fourth terrorist attack in Germany in the best part of 6 months? I remember there was one in Essen where police said, oh, this is a domestic incident, despite the perpetrator apparently waving around a Palestinian flag. There was the Christmas market atrocity. There was that attempted mass stabbing on the kindergarten where a man and a child lost their lives. And now this.
Well, it's hard to keep track. You had Magdeburg, Aschaffenburg, Solingen. Now you have Munich. I mean, it basically happens every month in Germany. But if we just go through the raw numbers, I looked it up all over Europe because this is a broader issue. And Alex, you know this very well because you just recently did a wonderful documentary about a horrific topic. So I hope that all your viewers and listeners have been watching it. We have 120 knife attacks per day, not per week, not per month, per day in France. We have on average 2 gang rapes per day in Germany. So what we are currently experiencing, and I really want to talk about this a little bit more, significant parts of the West are suffering from a form of collective Stockholm syndrome. Because if you can no longer go to a Christmas market, to a park, if your kids can no longer go to a Taylor Swift dance club like it happened in Southport, you are basically a hostage in your own country. But instead of talking why this is the case, we have all these weird conversations about, well, maybe we don't integrate them enough, maybe we are not welcoming enough. This is exactly how a hostage is speaking after they have been freed from their hostage taker. This is a form of Stockholm syndrome, and it's time that we overcome it.
Yeah, Stockholm puts me in mind of Sweden. I mean, the horrific reports there constantly of these bomb attacks taking place in cities across Sweden between rival gangs, largely recruiting loads of foreigners just off the boatist refugees welcome, that old cohort,
not just
dealing
Sweden.
Drugs.
Not just Sweden, you had the same in the French city of Grenoble. Just, I think 2 days ago, we had an attack with a hand grenade. It's very hard to keep track. If you would ask me 5 years ago, I would have said that the talk about civil war is overblown. But what we're currently experiencing is the civil war is taking place, but the media has decided not to report on it. Yeah. That's quite much what's happening. And the second part, and Alex, we have to talk about this. What we are experiencing, again, in Germany, in the United Kingdom, in France, in parts we did in the United States before Trump, is a conspiracy by the government against its own people. I want to be very clear about this. In Germany, we have now again talks about demonstrations against the far right. So every time a migrant kills someone, and let's be clear, this specific migrant, his asylum claim was rejected in 2017. He was supposed to leave the country in 2020. So this person had no right whatsoever to be in Germany. Yet he stayed, yet the authorities did nothing, and now 20 people have been harmed. Their life will never be the same. A toddler is among them. And once again, just as in Britain after Southport, just with the grooming gangs, just as in France, just as everywhere all over the West, how many empty places at Christmas tables, at birthdays to parents have to endure before politicians realize that migration and the way it has happened over the last couple of years is killing our nations? It's plain and simple. This is killing our nations. If you can no longer freely move around in a park in a Christmas market, if you can no longer be free in your own country, what we are doing at the moment, Alex, we are turning our cities into extended versions of airport security zones.
Yeah.
Those are not free societies. And let me be clear, I spent my time between Vienna and Budapest. And, you know, Budapest is what a horrific Viktor Orban is in charge. We don't have anything of that in Hungary. And you know why? Because there is no mass migration in Hungary.
Yeah.
So, yes, maybe Mr. Orban is a conservative, but you are more free in Budapest than you're in London. And that's simply a fact.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. What you were saying, civil, I agree with you. I was going to say myself, it is almost though right now we are at war with these people. The whole idea these people are coming into the country with the best of intentions, want to integrate, love our society, love Western values, just desperately want to rub along like the average German or the average Brit. It's for the birds. I'm not saying there are people among those who have come from Afghanistan who aren't fond of us and who do want to integrate. I'm sure there's plenty of them that exist, especially those that helped US and UK troops over there, interpreters and the like. But there's a load of people coming from those countries who are deeply problematic, and they seem to have their asylum applications refused. They do petty crime, then they become drug dealers. Apparently this guy was lifted for drug dealing a number of times, and he's still in the country. Why is he not like the migrants in America who are in El Salvadorian cartels and Mexican drug gangs, all the tattoos on their face, shackled together, marched onto a military airplane and told, get out? Why are we not doing that? And at the same time, you're right, and I want to delve into this a bit more. Why is it? Is this being organised by Homeland Security on some level, that to stop greater public conflagration and people really kicking off and getting angry, that there always seem to be these protests against the sort of illusory far right? Barely exists. You know, there's a few people here and there with some swastikas, some skinheads and some tattoos, but by and large it's just ordinary people who don't like to see what's happening. And yet, you know, this is considered the bigger threat. And like you said, like clockwork, every time there's some sort of protest, some sort of riot, something's being coordinated. What's going on?
Well, I mean, if you look at two of the incidents in Germany, you mentioned the protest in Munich. In fact, there were placards at that protest that said, Munich is a diverse city. We are proud of our diversity. The same, by the way, was true. The terrorist attack in the city of Solingen was during a fest of diversity, a festival of diversity. I can only come back real quick to what I said before. This is a form of collective Stockholm syndrome. And the second thing, you mentioned it, it is a collusion on the one hand between politicians who have been marinated in this weird and suicidal multicultural ideology and anti-Western ideology, but they're also in cahoots, I would say, with an activist judiciary. I mean, I just recently heard the case in Great Britain where a criminal cannot be deported because it would be...
Oh, we might have lost you there, Ralph. I think that maybe you've been so brave and so erudite and so absolutely spot on with your commentary that the powers of be have infested the line and made sure we can't hear your sensible thoughts. But it's disgusting, isn't it? I mean, it's beyond... I often call this cultural vandalism, what we're doing. It's no longer just cultural vandalism. It's evil. It's actually inviting people to kill this country, kill the people in it. There's a brilliant professor called Gadsard. You might know him if you sort of, move about in the same sort of podcast circles as me. He calls what we have in Europe a suicidal empathy. This idea of, oh, poor them, poor little, what's his face coming over from your goat herding village in Afghanistan. He's just escaping the Taliban. What if he is the Taliban? I mean, it's just time and again. Germany was really on the front line when it came to the whole refugees welcome thing. Millions came into, a load of people came into Germany. Many might have dispersed to other countries, but Germany really took a lot in. And now look, almost on a monthly basis, terrorist attacks, indiscriminatory, pure evil, driving into just innocent people, whatever they're doing, we are now at war. It's terrifying. I don't know what to say apart from that. Going to take a short break. Let me know your thoughts on that or anything else we've been talking about. Let me remind you of the number there in case you've forgotten it. It's on the screen if you're watching, but if you happen to be listening instead, remember this: 0344 499 1000. That's the number if you want to dial that into your phone. You can be patched through to the studio to share your thoughts straight after the break, 0344 499 1000. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. The text number is 87222. Make sure you write the word talk before your message. We're on X at talkTV. I'm back after this.
Police asked her if she had about 100 quid to cover her fare and clean up the vomit, as well as extra damage to the taxi. She yelled that she was not paying for some dodgy C-words window and that she would get the effing Chelsea lawyers on this, meaning the Women's Super League club for which she plays. The court heard that when she was asked about paying, she brought up her banking app and waved her phone about to the police as though to show them she had plenty of money.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Lots of you saying how brilliant Ralph Schulhelmer is. Isn't he just? Someone says, what is it with your station cutting off your guests? Don't you worry, Ralph's just messaged me. It was a tech thing, wasn't it? You know what it's like. What is it with Wi-Fi? In this, you go to other countries and the Wi-Fi's good. I don't know what it's like over in Hungary. Maybe it ain't so good. But and it's phone signal. It's amazing how many parts of the UK basically have zero phone signal. It's like we live in a developing world nation. You can go to the middle of the blimmin' Sahara Desert and get your text messages, but oh no, centre of Gloucestershire, done. Cut off from the rest of the world. Utterly ridiculous. But yeah, lots of people saying how brilliant Ralph is. I love that man to bits. He is excellent. He should be elected to Parliament or something in Brussels, that rubbish institution that I used to be elected to, just so he could stick it to them. Stick it to Ursula von der Leyen. I'd love it. It would be box office. Right, shall we do some of your calls now and speak to Chris first of all. He's in Watford. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Alex. Yeah, just a quick one, just about Ukraine. And so one thing that's not really talked about is the Naftali-Bennett peace deal, which, if you go on YouTube, there's an interview with Naftali Bennett, who was the Israeli Prime Minister, who basically brokered a deal between Putin and Zelensky at the start of the war. And he claims that basically Boris Johnson was sent over, and I think Tucker Carlson's also confirmed this in interviews, that Boris Johnson was sent over basically to scupper this peace deal, allegedly on behalf of some of the big investors, you know, the companies, the ones that sort of own the world. And so my question is this whole Ukraine war basically just an asset stripping exercise? Because they've certainly already done, some of the big investment firms have already done deals to take a lot of the land from Ukraine. And it seems to me, you know, the other thing is Zelensky seems to have disappeared about 200 billion of the money that was sent over. I don't know if you saw the interview recently where he said they'd only be sent about 70 billion or something. It's like, where's the rest gone?
Yeah, do you know, I must admit, this is the first thing I've heard about this Naftali Bennett peace deal that was scuppered by Johnson. I'm going to have to look into that. That sounds absolutely fascinating. It's funny, isn't it? Whenever there's land up for grabs, who pops up? Oh, Blackrock,
yeah,
there they are.
I mean, it's in Wikipedia, actually, and Tucker Carlson's mentioned it in a lot of interviews, so I think it's fairly accepted as...
I mean, look, Tucker Carlson, I like Tucker Carlson tremendously, but I always take him with a pinch of salt. He seems to have gone a bit sort of tonto when it comes to loving Putin.
One of the people who said it, I think it was, is it Jeffrey Sachs, who used to be in the State Department, was with the interview with him. He said it. But, you know, either way, my point is, if you look at the net result of Ukraine, effectively Ukraine's been asset stripped.
Well, I mean, that very often happens, doesn't it, as a cause of a war? You know, countries are left blasted to smithereens and all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, we built it in return for X, Y and Z. And Ukraine is incredibly minerally rich. It's got gas fields. It develop about 75% of the world's fertiliser, another huge proportion of the world's wheat that gets exported everywhere, various oil, sunflower oil, etc. It is essentially a massive larder sat there in the middle of Europe. Europe, and a lot of people probably have eyes on wanting to get their mitts on the sort of stuff that Ukraine can produce. And so I always think these things are very worth looking into. Like I said, I didn't know about this peace deal. I'm going to go away and read into that myself, because there's so much stuff that just doesn't break the surface when it comes to other channels. And I like to dig things out and look into them.
The thing I'm looking forward to is part of the whole Doge thing.
They're going to audit the money to Ukraine, aren't they?
Well, this is the thing, and again, I listened to a Tucker Carlson thing the other day, and he was saying he'd just gone to a ski resort, and basically it was like the most expensive ski resort, and they were all Ukrainians driving around in sports cars, basically from this corruption money.
I have utmost sympathy. I stand with the people of Ukraine. I've been over to Ukraine twice myself. I've got some very dear friends there. Devastated to see when Russia invaded them and what happened. I'm very concerned about some of the people I know there. But also, we have to be realistic about Ukraine. There have been plenty of people. A very good friend of mine works in the business of anti-trafficking, counter-trafficking, and has software that the messages that you can ping to people to alert them. When women and girls were fleeing Ukraine at the outbreak of this war and crossing the border into places like Poland and trying to get to Poland, there are various charities who are established waiting to help them, say, like, the Red Cross, come here, this is going to show you shelter, this is how we can, when Ukrainian women and girls are being resettled. But there are a lot of brutal gangs waiting to essentially kidnap, pretend they were charity workers, and then kidnap women and girls and take them off to horrible fates. And Sean told me in no uncertain terms that among these gangs there were lots of Ukrainian gangs. No country can be wholly innocent. No country is without its own crime. And all these things need to be discussed in the open air. Does that mean that Putin was right to invade? Absolutely not. Does that mean Putin must be appeased? Absolutely not. But when it comes to what the nature of a peace deal would look like, I'd be interested to see the peace deal that Naftali Bennett put together, and whether or not that's going to be the sort of thing that Trump has in mind. Chris, thank you ever so much for your call, and thank you for bringing those things to my attention as well. Let's quickly speak to Tom in Glasgow. Hi, Tom.
Hiya, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you, my love?
I'm fine, thank you. Before I tell you my point, our hearts and prayers go to the people of Munich, because that's, again, disastrous. I think you're right in saying, I think that's 4 times in the last 6 months, and it's not acceptable. My point is, I was watching some American TV, and I was watching Senator Kennedy at the Congress, and they were speaking about the islands in the Pacific Ocean up from Mauritius, can't remember the name of them, that we're handing over. We've got a base in there with the US Army.
Yeah.
They want to take the islands back. They want us to rent the islands, a 90-year lease for £10 billion. But we have been told by Senator Kennedy, in no uncertain terms, that Keir Starmer is in there negotiating at the moment to drop the lease down, whether it be 10, 20, 30 years, and pay more money. Now, that doesn't make sense to me.
So, I'm glad you brought that up, Tom. We're going to have to go to a break now. But again, let's pick up on that in the next hour of the programme if we can. Don't go anywhere. There is so much more to discuss. I am back just after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Fascinating conversations we were having just before the break there. Someone else has messaged saying he's also heard, here we go, Lewis said, I messaged weeks ago regarding Boris and RFK's knowledge about asking Boris to rip up the accord. This is the Naftali Bennett peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia, as Biden asked him to. Funny, it was never mentioned on Talk. I swear, Lewis, this is the first time I'm hearing about it, and I normally go all sorts of places when it comes to reading about geopolitics and this, that, and t'other. Only so many hours in the day, though, but this has really sparked my interest. I am going to have a good old read of that. I tell you, it's fascinating. Indeed, it is. Right, let's catch up now with a good friend of mine, Candice Holdsworth, writer and broadcaster and a great friend of this ear channel. How are you doing, my darling?
Hello, nice to speak to you again.
Oh, it's lovely to have you on. Well, I want to start off talking to you about Germany, because what has happened there today is beyond tragic. It actually makes my blood boil. We're now seeing consistently in Germany terror attack after terror attack after terror attack, innocent lives being lost. We don't know if there are any fatalities yet after an asylum seeker has driven into a crowd. 24-year-old Afghan asylum seeker arrested over a suspected terrorist attack. At least 28 people are injured. We know that there are children in this demonstration that was happening at one of Germany's public sector unions asking for more pay. Yet again, a guy who'd come into the country in 2017, had his asylum claim rejected, started dealing in drugs. And now it seems to me he's, gone full-blown Islamist if he wasn't already and tried to kill as many people as possible. And what are we doing? What are we talking about? Oh, it's the far right. It's the far right. I mean, why has the whole of Europe gone so mad?
Yes, yeah. I mean, I think that this is the problem. It's something we've never got to grips with. I mean, even if you go back to the Bataclan attacks, that horrific massacre that took place, one of the men that was killed, his wife said that when she went to all the subsequent hearings, she could not believe that the word Islamism was never mentioned. I mean, people just were unable, I think, to deal with the fact of this. This was in Europe and it had been largely imported and we didn't know how to deal with it. I mean, it was 10 years this year as well since the Charlie Hebdo attacks as well. I mean, I remember the horrific reaction that came after that. Those people were almost blamed for their murder, that it was their fault. But I think we're also in a moment now, which I think is accurate, where people have very little patience with it. And you see that it is distorting politics in Germany now. And you're starting to see that the AfD, for instance, is getting more support, which was previously a taboo in German politics, but less and less so, because the mainstream isn't dealing with it. And the mainstream has to deal with these issues, or people will turn to alternative methods.
Yeah, I mean, good on them, I say. It's utterly ridiculous. To me, it seems that Overton window has now shifted so much that most political parties in the UK are far behind where a lot of the general public are at with all of this.
It's not even a shift. It's like getting kicked in. I mean, that's what's happening to the Overton window right now.
Right. I want to repeat something that Ralph Schulhammer told me in the last hour of the programme. I couldn't believe this when he said this. Statistics on crimes from so-called refugees, welcome asylum seekers in Europe. There's now 120 knife attacks in France per day and 2 gang rapes in Germany per day. What is going on? I mean, to me, it seems like we're at war. I've just recently done a documentary with a brilliant think tank all about statistics on rape in this country, in the UK. And when you look at the perpetrators of many sexual assaults, sexual harassment, sexual abuse and rape, they are foreign-born.
Yes, yes.
3 to 1. And we're not allowed to talk about it because that makes us racist. There are people in this country who are coming to this country, who came to Germany, who came to Sweden, who came to Denmark, who came to the Netherlands, who came to France, not because they're fleeing war, because they want to start one.
Yeah. Well, look at that attack on it. It failed, but there was that man who tried to bomb a maternity hospital. He actually wanted to go in and blow up mothers and their babies. And that is something that had happened in, I believe it was Syria. No, it was Afghanistan. It was in Afghanistan. They'd stormed a hospital and they'd shot women and babies. You know, there are parts of the world where there is huge amounts of violence against women. Yeah. It actually happens. I mean, if you look at what's going on in Afghanistan, women are treated as if they are absolutely nothing. Yeah. And people don't just drop these ideas when they cross the border. And there's absolutely no thought whatsoever about understanding how people who've been brought up with these kind of ideas are going to integrate into our society.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. In very much Islamist ideology, women essentially chattel to be traded as the spoils of war. And we just go, oh, well, they're coming from these war-torn regions where mad people with big beards have taken over and are treating women disgustingly. Why aren't we taking in the women of Afghanistan who are silenced, who aren't allowed to leave the house, who have to dress up as ghosts, who are stoned in the street? We're not taking them in, the ones who are the victims. We're taking in the people who commit the atrocities by and large. And it's just a society that doesn't protect its women and its girls is no longer a functioning civil society. Let's talk now about Ukraine. Let's talk about this conversation between Putin and Trump. And we know it's been a long conversation. We know that Trump said for a long time he wants to be the one to broker a peace deal. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people on the surface of it think, great, wouldn't it be fantastic if this war of attrition came to an end that cost billions of pounds, dollars, euros, whichever currency you want to look at, which has spiked international inflation because there have been strictures placed on exports of oil and grain and fertilizer coming out of Ukraine, and of course the energy crisis has been precipitated because the EU have been sucking off the Russian energy teats for way too long and not becoming energy independent. Self-flagellating with net zero. A lot of people think, OK, this needs to come to an end. And I remember at the start of this conflict, everyone talking about building a golden bridge for Putin. But now there's been this phone call. We don't know what the details are at all. We don't. And all of a sudden, the same people saying we need to build a golden bridge for Putin, and he lashes out and he's nasty when he's cornered, are saying, but this is clearly going to be appeasement. I mean, look, we don't know what it's going to be, but is it? I mean, where do you stand on this?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you've said. We all want this to come to an end. And one thing I really never want to be is an armchair general. I mean, I don't want to say, you know, let's go fight, stand up, Ukraine. And it's so easy for me to say that when I'm perfectly safe and I don't have to flee my home or lose any of my family members. But I think it was important what Ukraine did. They did have to draw a red line, I think, and say, you know, that sovereignty needs to be respected. It depends what the US is trying to achieve with this deal. Are they just trying to bring the war to an end? And they could do that on terms that are very favorable to Putin, and then the war will end, because I think the US does want to pivot more towards China, and all that their foreign policy seems to be shifting more towards, you know, national interest, securing the homeland. I mean, you know, they've spoken about getting hold of Greenland, for instance, because they have real interests in that area. I think no peace deal will be credible unless Ukraine is involved, and I think that they do need to push to be involved. It's gotten to this point now. By the way, that caller who mentioned Naftali Bennett, I've heard of that. He said that Europe and the Ukraine were willing to take a more pragmatic approach to ending the war, but Boris Johnson did encourage Ukraine to take a harder, more maximalist stance. But since then, I think things have sort of stalemated a little bit, and Russia hasn't made much progress, although Ukraine, interestingly enough, they have got territory. So they do have something they can bargain with. They have taken some Russian territory. So they're not in a totally weak position here.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Like I said, I'm in no position to say I want to condone the invasion of Ukraine or want to appease Putin. Far from it. I think he needs to be really put back into his box, absolutely, for the sake of peace in Europe. This is on our doorstep. It can escalate. It can spread. It's happened before. We have seen this time and again in Europe. And I totally agree with some of the things Andrew Fox was saying earlier, which is, unfortunately, he's seen before in the outbreak of the First World War and the Second World War, these things happened when America kind of turned its back on Europe and had sort of more of a position of, oh, well, you know, that old Hitler, he's only causing problems over there. Yes. And I think that there is a huge risk if if Trump says to Putin, OK, Vlad, what do you want? Can you just stop the fighting? Oh, we're going to come after you if you do this again. Well, that might be OK for the tenure that Trump has, but what about the successor? You know, Putin is a man who has a drawn-out strategy. He annexed Crimea in 2014 and waited quite a long time before he went in for more. Yes. I'm not sure we can trust if he's given anything that he's just going to go, oh, thanks for that. Yeah, I'm going to be nice again now. The man's a warmonger. The man's a tyrant. The man is a monster. But again, at the same time, to me, it's a load of coulda, woulda, shoulda. We should have done things. We should have strong-armed a lot earlier than we did. And when I say we, Britain kind of did. It was the rest of Europe who went, oh, God, because they're so attached to Putin economically. They've been buying his energy. For too long, the international community said, let's all sit around the table. If we bring Russia in and treat them nicely, maybe they're going to play nice. Well, guess what? They don't. Dictators don't. You can't negotiate with terrorists and tyrants. And this is my big concern about this conversation, although at the same time, this has got to come to an end.
Yeah, I think you're making such a good point there. I really agree. It's sort of, you know, how do we solve these kind of problems? Do we agree? Do we do it through sort of integration and economic integration, having, you know, an energy policy that's largely integrated, or, you know, trade policy that's integrated? Or do we think more in our national interest? So we think far ahead about energy security, being able to rely on our own energy resources, because it's so true. Putin was able to exploit that, and exploit that really easily. And I think that's the sort of shift you're sort of seeing in US foreign policy now. They're sort of moving towards a real sort of like pragmatic and what some people have called transactional nationalism, where they really put their national interests first. Yeah. But it's not unprecedented in history that they've done that. And then they've had to sort of take on a more internationalist approach again, as always happens with the US throughout history and throughout all the big wars, because ultimately it is integrated with Western culture.
Yeah, Candice, something's just popped into my head. This doesn't build on the list of something I'm supposed to be talking to you about, so we're not going to have pretty pictures to put up. But I want to talk to you about what's going on in South Africa.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yes.
Yeah, because well, you know, you from South Africa, right? You are a white woman from South Africa. You must be deeply alarmed at what's going on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we lived there for 11 years, but yeah. So it is fascinating. It seems like South Africa is very struggling as a member of the sort of BRICS bloc of countries to kind of keep both the US and the BRICS on side. And the US now has sort of decided, it's been irritated for quite a long time now that it believes South Africa is doing things which are contrary to US interests. So they had a big Russian warship docking in Cape Town. Right. They have been dealing with Iran. They did this ICJ case against Israel. And then recently, the US has accused them of aiding Iran with nuclear development. Right. So that is very, very, very serious. So, I mean, Trump issued an executive order basically saying South Africa had committed egregious acts.
But not just that. What I really wanted to speak to you about, I mean, yes, that's actually, I've noticed this myself. There were joint naval exercises between South Africa, Iran, Russia, China a number of years ago. And of course, when you have the Houthis throwing missiles around and you've got the Black Sea as a result of Russia messing about up there and Iran messing about in the Red Sea, then cargo has to be diverted, that's right, underneath South Africa. And so when South Africa joins in naval exercises, you have to worry. They're definitely on the side of the bad uns, the anti-Western axis. But what I wanted to ask you about was this proposal to just strip land from the white farmers, some of the rhetoric coming out from political leaders there, talking essentially about shooting the farmers, killing the women, killing the girls. I mean, it sounds like it's going to absolutely explode. It's scary.
Well, yeah, it's this new act which they've just signed into law. It's the Expropriation Without Compensation Act. So they've been talking about this for a very long time. It's part of the ANC's long-running land reform. So the latest iteration now is that they don't have to pay any market rate for taking land or property that they deem is in the public interest, which, I mean, is so broadly defined. And of course, that brings up echoes of which country? Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
Zimbabwe. And who did all the farms go to in Zimbabwe? ZANU-PF apparatchiks. It did not go to productive people. Never mind that. I mean, you're just completely undermining property rights.
Yeah.
So, I mean, who would want to invest in South Africa long term, knowing that the government can just snatch things? And it's making people very upset, and they're just wondering, you know, what do I do long term? And Trump has come in and said, well, if you're an Afrikaner, you can go and settle in the US.
Yeah.
And apparently 17,000 people have inquired about this.
Can't blame them. Problem is, largely with the international community, if it's some sort of genocide or attack against white people, it doesn't count. That's allowed. Let's go back to domestic politics here. Rachel Reeves, I mean, this is astonishing. Apparently, when she was at HBOS in the late 2000s, she was audited, which was advised by the risk department there, because she was using expenses to buy all sorts of stuff. Perfume, earrings, wine, fancy dinners, living the life of Riley. Very cavalier about how she was spending the company's money. Weirdly spending a lot of it buying gifts for her superiors, brown-nosing, it seems, at the company's expense. It seems to me this woman doesn't have any integrity.
Well, this isn't the first time. Have you heard about the story about her parliamentary credit card? It was also taken away for unauthorised spending up to £4,000. The Parliamentary Standards Authority investigated it and she was forced to repay it. So this is kind of a pattern at places that she's worked, making unauthorised spending. Then you have the plagiarism scandal with her book. I mean, this is someone who is a little bit unscrupulous and isn't always above board in her dealings. And I think it's absolutely right for people to be calling it out. The Chancellor of the Exchequer is a position of great gravitas and responsibility, and the right person needs to be doing it. I just wonder if this will make Keir Starmer wobble on her a little bit. I mean, there have been rumours like that he is, but he hasn't been keen to yet. I don't think he's wanted to be forced into any sort of moves by his opponents. But I think now that this has been taken up by everybody, this issue, I wonder if that her position's becoming a little bit weaker now.
Yeah, no, I think you're right about that. It'd be interesting to see how quickly he needs to do some sort of cabinet reshuffle. There's been all sorts of scandals already with Louise Haigh, of course, and the multiple phones. Candice, thank you ever so much. It's brilliant catching up with you. Fantastic insights there. Right now, ladies and gentlemen, before we go to break, should we lighten the mood a bit? Yes, we shall, because now is the time to find out how you could be in the chance of winning 25,000 big ones. Have a listen.
It's competition time, and we're giving you a chance to win a whopping £25,000. So what do you need to do to get involved? All you have to do is text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post. It's as simple as that. Once again, to get involved, just text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post.
18 plus, UK excluding NI. Enter by SMS for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on March the 3rd, 2025. Or send your name, email and contact number to £25,000 cash competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on March the 6th, 2025. This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Well, there you go. Good luck if you're wanting to enter that competition. We could all do a 25 grand with Rachel Reeves running the economy, couldn't we? So do get involved with that one. And you never know, it could be you. Wasn't that the old lottery catchphrase? Maybe it still is the lottery catchphrase. Does anyone still play the lottery? It's a big thing back in the sort of 90s, wasn't it? Mystic Meg and all that. Right, now, coming up after the break, Sir Keir Starmer went to do a big sort of press piece all about we're going to build all these houses, it's going to be wonderful, there's not going to be any housing shortages anymore, the cost of buying somewhere is going to come right down because we're tearing up all the sort of red tape around development, and look at this shiny new housing estate we got coming, isn't it brilliant? Except it didn't really go according to plan. Find out after this.
If you have an active threat to a member of public or to a politician, you better believe it should be your policy to send somebody to protect them. And they didn't do that. I've been waiting 7 weeks for somebody to get back to me regarding my complaint against them. Finally, I heard back from the IOPC. The letter was addressed to Mr. Amos, so I don't know if that's some kind of a sick joke, telling me that they weren't going to be doing an investigation, but they couldn't tell me why. And if they think that they're going to just investigate themselves and find themselves not guilty, they have another thing coming.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Now, you must have seen the programme, The Thick of It, where everything seems to go wrong. With all the best intentions, various ministers turn up to ribbon cut and to self-aggrandise about some fantastic bit of government policy. And it always somehow goes wrong because, hey, that's politics. Well, it was a bit farcical when Sir Keir Starmer turned up today in Buckinghamshire to announce the creation of all of these wonderful new homes that Labour guaranteed to build around the country. And there he was, grandstanding next to a building site. But, well, shall we have a little watch and a listen about what went on? Now, that isn't Darude Sandstorm being performed by a load of people on some sort of re-engineered bagpipes or something. That is the ingenious horns on various tractors, because there was a farmers' protest going on in the vicinity. And when they found out that Keir Starmer was about to open a new building site or whatnot, cut a piece of clod, plant a tree, wear a high-vis jacket and look like a moron, they thought, how about we go and give him a visit? And so they played that sort of psychedelic 60s soundtrack in the background. I loved it. But did he take time to listen to their concerns? Well, shall we have a little look?
I don't know. Absolute shambles.
If you're in there, just talk to us.
Talk to us.
There we go. That is the horns, the farmers' horns, all going off there. And Sir Keir Starmer, where is he? I'm looking at the video. If you're listening on radio, you can't see it. There's a few farmers there who want to have a word with our Prime Minister about the way that they've been really cut adrift. And I can't think of a polite term to say what the government's done to farmers. But no, the Prime Minister decided to be bundled into the back of the car and driven back to Downing Street, still wearing his high-vis jacket. And to make things even more farcical, to show how moronic the man is, he was seen getting out the car in Downing Street at the other end of the motorway, still wearing that high-vis jacket. I mean, you'd think at some point someone might be like, mate, why don't you take the jacket off now? You look a bit weird still wearing that. You're no longer at the building site, our son. Nope, he was still wearing it. What an absolute tool. I'm with the farmers all the way on this. I was supposed to be giving a big talk at the latest farmers' protest. Alas, I couldn't because I was ill. I support them 100% and all of their deeds. So let's catch up with one of them, shall we? A member of Farmers to Action, Philip Weston. Hi, Philip.
Hi, Alex. How are we doing?
Yeah, I'm very well. I'm very well. Now, were you there at this particular protest?
I was, yeah. And can I just say, it's absolutely hilarious about him getting out the other end in his high-vis coat again. Yeah, made my evening. Thank you.
What was he wearing a high-vis jacket for anyway? It seemed to be standing in a car park or something. I mean, it's just mad. They love doing this. They put on their sort of like Mr. Ben dress-up box cosplaying as a working man toolmaker's son. It's like, not pulling the wool over my eyes. But so you turned up and you thought, here, Keir Starmer's down the road, let's go speak to him directly. A PR coup would have been if he had taken the time, approached you guys and said, right, I'm going to do the thing. I'm the Prime Minister. I'm going to have a conversation. I'm sure at that point the Darude Sandstorm, horn would have stopped playing and you'd have had a conversation and explained really how this was affecting you. But that isn't what happened.
Well, we don't want to be doing it at the end of the day, Alex. You know, it's taken a lot of my time up today. But he isn't talking to us. You know, he's not coming to us to talk. We've got to go to him to talk, unfortunately. And, you know, you're just showing on screen there, us in London. You know, that event there in particular was Save British Farming, dealt with Liz Webster and Ollie Fletcher and various other ones. But, you know, there are a multitude of other different groups there. Farmers to Action were a very big part of that. Other groups there also. So, you know, it was a good event to go to. You know, it was a good attendance. It was a good visual. But, you know, most farmers left that event feeling very despondent. You know, on the presentations that we were given at the event, we weren't really told where we were meant to be going from this. Very uninspired, to be quite honest. And, you know, we listened to 2.5 hours of people debating, a lot of very positive factual comments made by other MPs in our favour. And then you get the one Labour man stand up for 4 minutes and basically repeat everything that we've already heard, somehow thinking that repeating and repeating and repeating is somehow going to make it right. You know, the facts are still wrong, and he is still lying.
But they do like. I mean, what they changed their tune yet on when it comes to inheritance tax? They said, well, you know, only a small scattering of farms are going to be affected, barely any, nothing to see here. Oh, it's only going to make the Treasury like 500 million, which I'm like, well, that's basically naff all, frankly. That's coins down the back of the sofa when it comes to the budget of the Exchequer. You could just not bother doing it in the first place. And yet, all the reports that we've heard from, first of all, the NFU and NUF, and then what we've heard as well, no, NFU. I don't know, whatever acronym it is. I'm still fluey. And then what we heard from DEFRA was actually this could affect a load of farms. This could affect, I keep hearing different amounts. What are you hearing? How pernicious is this policy going to be? Are you affected by this?
Oh, it's absolutely colossal, Alex. I mean, look, on a family farm, we've been here since 1820. We're my 5th generation. You know, I've got 2 kids of my own, which obviously are for it to pass over to them. And, you know, how can we say this? You know, my father died in October 21, you know, and, you know, he was advised, we were advised by solicitors and accountants to use what was available to us. You know, we went down that route. It was meant to protect us and protect my mother, who is still alive. But, you know, we've now got those figures from, you know, the accountants that we've been to. We know that a 300-acre farm, which according to your Reeves, your Reeds, Mr. Starmer, is the size farm that is going to be completely unaffected by this. You know, we are looking at hundreds of thousands of pounds. And that is our working capital. That is our opportunity to reinvest in machinery. Yeah. And obviously live. You know, we've somehow got to live amongst all of it.
What I don't understand is this government seems to think, well, if you've got all this farmland, 300 acres worth all that money, you're rolling in it, you're practically a millionaire. But the point is, you're being punished, penalised simply for handing your farm down to your kids to farm. It's not like there are people all over the country ready to don a pair of wellies, drive a tractor and start, you know, toiling in the fields. It very often is very much kept within the family because that is how it's passed down generationally. The skills, the love, the knowledge, maintaining as well the wonderful British pastoral traditions of farming, not this sort of intensive rearing we're seeing in America and in Central Europe. We then know that as well this Labour Party want more fields to be rewilded, other ones to be turned over for solar farms. I mean, unless you can eat a solar panel in a sandwich, I can't see what that's going to do for the nation's diet. Load of nonsense. And I did a bit of research into this and I found out that before the outbreak of the Second World War, we were producing about 60% of what we ate in the UK ourselves. The other 40% largely was being imported. We're about that level now, and actually the attack on farming that we're seeing coming from this government, without doubt, that is going to drop. Now, what then happened in the outbreak of war is all the lines of supply lines got disrupted, and we were plunged into a disaster where one of the main mottos of the Second World War back at home was dig for victory, farm your land, you know, get on and grow your own vegetables. And then, of course, we had rationing, which lasted all the way into the 1950s because we didn't have enough food. And you have to ask yourself, what sort of sane government gives over its ability to feed its own country?
Yeah, absolutely unreal, isn't it? And I mean, you've hit 2 big things there, the level of imports and, you know, it isn't just the IHT that is going to be killing us here. You know, there's far more higher-reaching things. You know, we've got carbon tax here, fertiliser, and, you know, that's something we're going to deal with next year. You know, and European countries aren't getting that. we're getting pesticides banned here, which European farms are still using. The added problem we've got here is their produce, 60% of it is being imported into this country. They are using all these things that we have no longer got available to us. We are not on a level playing field here. You know, we are getting slaughtered by the imports here at the moment. You know, we hear a lot of talk about fair pay from supermarkets. If they're importing that much food, they can have an abundance of it. They can offer it at a price. You know, a simple solution to a lot of this would be to do what a lot of other countries have done, and that is put a cap on the exports. You know, they realise there is an importance to food in their countries. We haven't got that, unfortunately. You know, our MP does not realise this. You know, if we put a cap and it got turned around that we were back to doing 60% of our own and only 20%, we would have more options on the table to discuss with supermarkets and get a fairer price, right? In my personal opinion. But, you know, we're meant to be raising 500 odd million from all this inheritance tax. It's nothing. It's a drop in.
It's naffle. It's naffle. And I always think, if you want to know what your enemies are planning to do to you, look what they're doing themselves. And China, for instance, who once upon a time relied on food imports, has decided it wants to be totally self-sufficient. Now, when it comes to food, they're actually encouraging people actively to go into farming, to expand farmland, to make sure they're producing a lot more. And you think, well, if they're doing that, why on earth are we saying to China, let's buy a load of solar panels from you, stick it on our farmland instead? How many farmers do you know now quitting? You must know a lot of people going, I just can't do this anymore, or selling land because they got to pay the inheritance tax.
Yeah, can I just go back on that one?
Yeah.
You know, and this is also to address Mr. Starmer's response after getting back to 10 Downing Street in his high vis. You know, he then went on to attack us again. Or, shall I say, he's went to put us off against the NHS. He's saying, pick one. You know, we either pick the NHS and better pay and help for them, or pick a farmer. And he says we pick the NHS. Well, look, unfortunately, yeah, we are not funding the NHS by our inheritance tax. You know, 500 million, so going back to that figure. We are giving more away to foreign farms at the moment. You know, Brazil, China, 550 million, I think the figure was. How can our inheritance tax be helping fund public service when they are giving more away to foreign farms, but also giving that money to foreign farms to compete against us, which are going to be driving imports up and our costs down even further?
It makes no sense. It's cruel, it's heartless, but it's callous, but it's absolutely nonsensical. I mean, any country, we sit there, we think, oh, great, it's been peace for a long time. Oh, we're actually still in the G7. Everything's fine and dandy over here in Britain. But you know what? The minute you start losing your farming, you actually face the very real prospect of famine. It's that simple. Things can go very wrong with supply chains. We're an island. It makes absolutely no sense. Look, Philip, I'm massively on your side. Keep doing those protests. The public are overwhelmingly backing you. They really are overwhelmingly backing you. My producer Ryan just said something hilarious in my ear. This is worth repeating. He said, what sort of numbskull does a getaway wearing a high-vis jacket? It's just, it beggars belief. The man is a moron. Philip, thank you ever so much. Right, we're going to take a short break now. It's your opportunity to toil the great land of common sense and pick out some vegetables of brilliance and throw them in my direction. 03444991000 is the number to call if you would like to be cabbage patched through to the studio. You can also leave me a little nugget, not a chicken nugget made in a foreign country that some sort of child of a deportee is unwilling to eat, a nugget of wisdom via voice note on WhatsApp as well. The same number, 03444991000. You can wang me a text, 87222 is the number for that. Remember to write the word talk before your text so it comes directly into these ear studios, or you can send me a comment on X at talkTV. I'm back after this.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello there, you lovely things. It's time that you help me out and let me know what you think about some of the stories we have been discussing today. Shall we rattle through some of your messages at first? We were talking about the disgusting atrocities taking place in Germany on a regular basis now. Yet another terrorist attack. We know that a 24-year-old Afghan refugee, asylum seeker, whatever he's called, migrant, illegal, has ploughed a car into a protest there. We don't have fully confirmed statistics yet on whether there have been any fatalities. What we do know is there are at least 28 people injured, some of them critically, and we believe that women and girls were among protests taking place for more public sector pay, which is what the target was of this terrorist, it would seem. 24-year-old Afghan citizen has been arrested. And Bernie in Hartlepool has said Angela Merkel has blood on her hands for these incidents. She welcomed hundreds. It could soon come here as well. You just walk around London and you see all of these bollards and, you know, the same when I used to live in Brussels. They're everywhere there. And you think, this didn't used to be here before. We didn't used to have big concrete blocks preventing people from murderously driving cars into innocent civilians. Why has that happened? Oh, yeah, now I remember. Well, look, listen, I'm not really one to start reading out Goebbels quotes, but I'm sure that my detractors would expect it of me. But someone sent this in, and it's actually quite pertinent. My God, I'm probably going to get into trouble with this. Someone's going to clip it and go, look, there she goes, Nazi. I mean, get real, grow up. But if you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. The lie can be maintained only for such time as the state can shield people from the political, economic and or military consequences of the lie. It thus becomes vitally important for the state to use all of its powers to repress dissent. For the truth is the mortal enemy of the lie, and thus by extension the truth is the greatest enemy of the state. I think that's quite pertinent. By reading that out, if anything, I'm comparing the current government to National Socialists. Yeah, I mean, you do feel more and more, don't you, that we're just being gaslit. That, well, Schorhammer on earlier was saying, why is it every time there's a terrorist attack, all of a sudden there are all these protests against the far right? Where are this far right? Are they committing atrocities? Are they putting bombs places and driving cars into people and stabbing people in the street and committing gang rapes? No. If the far right was so scary and so real, you'd have thought they'd have done something by now. Well, they haven't. Is that just because the security services are better at finding them? I mean, someone explain to me why we have to have constant demonstrations against something which palpably I don't really seem to think exists in any big and scary way. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but it doesn't seem to be, you know, stalking the streets and of our nation and setting mosques on fire, because if it was, it would be everywhere in the news, wouldn't it? It'd be reported, you know, cover to cover in every single newspaper, wall to wall on every single broadcast channel. If the far right were going around bombing places and smashing windows and attacking people in the street, we wouldn't hear the end of it. But I haven't seen a single report of that happening, and yet we constantly have marches against them. Make it make sense. Someone else has messaged me saying, I love and share your passion about this invasion of the Western world by an Islamist army. Someone summed it up brilliantly recently. When men flee war, they take their women and children. But when they go to war, they leave their women and children at home. Right, if we're going to take people from these dastardly, awful, tyrannical, backwards, medieval, brutal countries in the Middle East, surely it should be the women and the children. They're the ones who are largely being repressed and murdered and attacked and abused. But we're not. It's just a load of fighting-age men coming over on boats, and we're like, oh, poor them. We better give them a hotel room and a PlayStation. And what? It's mad. It doesn't just defy common sense. It defies decency. Right, let's speak now to Mike, who's in Poole. Hi, Mike.
Hi, that was brilliant. Have you ever thought of being on Just a Minute? Anyway, my wind has been taken out of my sails a little bit, because I was going to phone in and comment about all these people saying what Mr. Trump has said to Putin, including your expert, waving hands, Andrew Fox. Nobody knows what was discussed. Trump could have said to Putin, if you don't pull back within a month, you're going to have trouble, and in that moment you can make it sound like you won. We have no idea what was said.
Yeah, no, exactly. This is what I keep saying. We don't know. And it's funny because it's Trump. Do you know what? If it had been anybody else, if this had been Macron, or if this had been, I don't know, Olaf Scholz or Ursula von der Leyen who'd gone to the Kremlin and spoken to Trump and said, we now have the basis for an agreement between Russia and Ukraine to end the war, everyone would be like, isn't it brilliant? Isn't it amazing? Oh, the European Union. Oh, it's the broker of peace. Because it's Donald Trump, it's like, wow, this is appeasement, isn't he evil? I mean, we've got to get real about this. We don't know what it's going to be, so we just need to wait and find out.
There's a lot of Trump derangement syndrome. That was the problem. And love listening to your show. Cheers me up no end.
Oh, thanks, Mike. It cheers me up having people like you phone in as well. Beautiful Dorset accent there. Good old West Country man. Right, that was Mike. Hey, we've got another person from Dorset. What's going on here? Dorset Massive phoning in today. This is Peter. Hi, Peter.
Hi there. Great show, and you always make me laugh.
Thanks.
As far as I'm concerned, we've got a bully bear, and it's called Russia. And basically, we are in a situation where the only thing that a bully understands is a bloody nose. And we don't want to give anybody a bloody nose, but we need to be strong enough to show that if you are going to bully us, you are going to get a bloody nose. And basically, European defence, British defence, needs to be standing strong. Originally, we had the Berlin Wall. Nobody wants to go back to that again. But at the time, there was a lot more feeling of security because we had a strong arm there to show we're not going to be overrun by anybody. Now, the USSR pulled back. It's Russia. Yes, they've been having a go at Ukraine, and it's horrific. But now, look at all the other little minnows standing around there, and we need to make sure that Europe is ready for defence, Britain is ready for defence, and that is that's externally. But internally, with what you've been talking about, with all the problems of attacks in Germany, look, we've seen enough of what these people can do in the Middle East all over the place, and they are thick and in our midst. And basically, people who are coming off these boats and all the rest of it, who we don't know who they all are, these people should be followed into society, not just allowed to run into society, and we look after.
I think they should be expelled from society. Quite frankly, you can't break into a country as committing a crime. Most other countries, if you try and hop over the border fence unannounced, you probably get shot by their security forces. We give them a hotel room. I'm not advocating we start putting cannons on, the White Cliffs of Dover or anything like that. I'm not a barbarian, but we certainly shouldn't be going like, well done for making the journey on a boat. Come on in, welcome. We don't know who you are. You've come from a nasty country run by terrorists. You're probably not one of them. I mean, it's just madness. And you say we've seen what these people do in their own countries. We've seen what they do in our countries. The first time that there was a terrorist atrocity, it should have been enough. We should have got the message that we are in real danger. Now, to repeat something that Ralph Schulhammer told me earlier, in France there's currently 120 knife attacks every single day. In Germany there's 2 gang rapes every single day. Sweden looks like the Gaza Strip, the amount of bomb attacks going off all the time between rival gangs, and we're just there going, oh well, it's the far right. I sometimes think that the leaders of Europe actually want to destroy Europe. There doesn't seem to be any other commonsensical reason behind all of this. Oh, Peter, what are we going to do? Thank you ever so much, my darling. Right, got to take a short break now, but when we come back, we're going to be digging into Rachel Reeves' expenses because, well, they're pretty spicy. That's coming up after this.
I would go so far as to actually sanction people who are parents who encourage this in their children. You know, I think it's worse than neglectful. I think it is encouraging serious mental health problems. No child or teenager who identifies as an animal is likely to have a happy, balanced, good life, are they?
Yeah.
Hello, I'm turning up for a job interview. I'm going to be a fox today. Would you mind employing a fox? You know, not going to happen really, is it?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Now, what would you look for in the perfect Chancellor of the Exchequer? Someone who is to manage the money of the country, who we are to entrust billions, nay trillions of pounds that come from you and me and our ancestors and our relatives and our future children, because Lord knows how much debt we've got to service. You want someone who, A, is a brilliant economist, who really gets it, B, is extremely creative and knows how to change things, because we've been in the doldrums for quite a while now. And most importantly, when you're trusted with that much money, you need somebody with integrity as well as great intelligence. Well, don't worry, old Lego head herself, Rachel Reeves, to the rescue. That's right, the woman with the improbable fringe, a haircut that looks like it's been made by some sort of plastic toy shop in Taiwan, is at it again. Not only is she the most rubbish Chancellor we've ever had, seeming to make every single decision that's anti-business, whacking up national insurance, then goes, oh, the NHS, guess what? GP surgeries have to pay national insurance as well. You know, people in the medical profession, social care, they have to pay national insurance. Oh no, not only is she an absolute numbskull when it comes to that, but apparently she's got a very cavalier attitude when it comes to spending expenses. Now, before she was an MP, she, of course, was an economist. Halifax Bank of Scotland. Or wasn't. She just had some sort of headset and did something, Lord knows what it was. But she was apparently very good at spending the company's money on funding a lifestyle of dinners, events, taxis and gifts. That's right. She was taking money from HBOS to buy perfume, earrings, handbags, wine. And the weirdest part of all of it is a lot of this stuff she wasn't buying for herself, but buying for her bosses, robbing from the company to brown nose. I mean, the woman is an outright idiot. But what's worse is clearly there wasn't much due diligence done into the background that, she lied on her CV, we all know that. But if they'd scraped a little further, they'd have found out she was investigated by internal auditors at the request of the bank's risk department. And this is the woman who's moaning about there being a urinal in a bathroom, apparently, which dates back from, I don't know, some sort of like brilliant piece of memorabilia from Churchill's time or something. I took down a picture to replace it with a communist. And it's essentially just destroying the country, one decision after the next. And what's she doing there? I mean, she's going to have to go, isn't she? Let's be fair, she's going to have to go. Let's speak to Philip Ullman, social business entrepreneur. He is, in fact, the chief energiser of Cordance Group, which is the UK's second largest recruitment and services firm, with revenues of 840 million, employing 125,000 people. Now, Philip, if someone was nicking money from your company to buy you aftershave and bottles of whiskey, would you go, that's nice, they deserve a promotion? Or would you say, what on earth are you doing?
Look, I think this justifies her nickname, Rachel from Accounts. And I agree with you, by the way, Alex, she's got to go. There's no doubt about it, she has to go. But it's much deeper. The kind of focus on the CV and expenses is one thing, but she has no vision. She has no understanding of the really dire straits that people are in. She's not listening to people. People can't afford to put food on the table. People can't afford to buy houses. But people have not got meaningful jobs. And she has not got any kind of idea of what to do. She, as indicated by these two stories, she just doesn't got a clue, and therefore People have lost trust in the government, and fundamentally she has to start addressing those real issues, Alex, and that way we start to build confidence with the government. But these kind of stories are indicative of somebody who's actually totally out of their depth.
Oh, without a doubt. And, it's kind of like it goes from bad to worse all the time. I don't understand what the policy of this government is anyway. But when she increased employers' national insurance and banged on about, well, it's not a tax on working people, well, of course it is, because if the people who employ them are then having to pay more money, they're going to be paying to HMRC, they're going to be paying less money to their staff. They're going to be employing fewer people. They're going to give them fewer hours. I mean, you work in recruitment. How bad has your sector been impacted?
I actually moved out of recruitment, Alex. I'm now in other spaces. But no, it's fundamentally, it will increase unemployment, as you said, because when profits are reduced by increased costs of national insurance, you have to make savings, and what you do is, as you say, you reduce employees, and that's what we're finding. All the retailers, everyone's doing it, so it's going to increase unemployment, reduce what the other thing is, of course, is when the NI goes up, the next time you're going to give people an increase, you're not going to give them the same increase, because of course the employers' national insurance costs have increased, so people are actually going to lose the increase in wages. So fundamentally this is a complete absurdity.
Yeah, I mean, there's something called the Laffer curve out there. I actually met Laffer himself when I was over in America. I was like, that's pretty cool. I like your curve. But the Laffer curve essentially is a graph that shows that you tax and tax and tax and tax and tax, and you make more money and you put more money in the country's pockets that you can then spend. Then all of a sudden you tax so much that it starts going the other direction, because people essentially find ways to evade the tax, they move out, businesses close down, and actually tearing that tax back. If you lower the cost, this is something that Laffer said at the presentation I was at in America, if you lower the cost of tax on the highest in society, the people who benefit the most are the people at the bottom. Believe it or not, the effect it has is creating more jobs, more employment, a greater share of the wealth. And yet, for some reason, these numbskull leftist communists in the government think the best way is just taxing anyone. Go after the farmers because they've got assets. They're not assets. That's their machinery and the land that they farm to feed us. That's not a pot of gold. That is the tools of the trade. I mean, what is wrong with these people?
And even more importantly, the key problem, as far as I can see, is the cost of living, Alex, yeah? The cost of living is massively increased. They talk about 2%. We all know the last couple of years, what is it when you go shopping? It hasn't increased by 2%. It's near 20 to 25%. Yeah. People cannot afford to put food on the table. On top of that, what they do, they then increase interest rates, which means people can't pay the mortgages. This is the real issue that people, your listeners, are concerned about. They're not dealing with it. She's not addressing it. There's no understanding, and therefore she's going to go. She will go. She's
got to go. She's got to go. Now listen, Reeves' spokeswoman says she was not aware of an investigation, nor was she interviewed. She didn't face any disciplinary action on any of these matters. All expenses were submitted and signed off in the proper way. All right then, Rach, whatever you say. Thank you ever so much, Philip. It's been fantastic catching up with you. Going to take a short break now, but there's still 1 hour of Alex to come, so don't go anywhere. We're going to be catching up with Tobias Ellwood when we get back, former chair of the Defence Select Committee. That's after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Alex Phillips here with you for another hour. Thank you so much for your company, and lots of messages coming in, lots of calls as well. It's nice to be back together again. It's been a while, hasn't it? My fault, all my fault. I did have to, zip on over to America and live it large at the inauguration and get some sort of mutant flu, which struck down a load of people. I'll tell you what, it was minus 11 degrees in Washington, D.C. And I don't mean at night time. When you look at the sort of weather app and it's like 2 degrees during the day and minus 11 at night, and you just go with the bigger number because it sounds cool. No, it was actually minus 11 degrees daytime. And it was like, yeah, and do you know what? At an inauguration as well, they have to close off loads and loads of roads for security reasons. So you have to get places on foot a lot of the time. So you're forced to walk in that minus 11 degrees, and going from events, most women are there in dresses and all the rest and high heels, walking on what feels like a walk-in freezer at a restaurant, worse than it actually. Oh my God, honestly. Then you're packed in these tiny little rooms, everyone cheek by jowl with canapes, mingling, super spreader events, remember those? And I came back with the worst flu I have ever had. I mean, seriously, this was mental. 1 week, right? I was just lying in bed, living from one painkiller to the next, and just, throwing that in my face, hoping that I might, last another hour. Then I started to feel really dizzy, and I thought, well, that's because I'm basically a walking drug addict. That's not walking, a reclined drug addict at this point. I need to probably get off the ibuprofen and paracetamol and night nurse and whatever else I was throwing in my face, because they're making me feel a bit weird. But it wasn't. The drugs were fine. What was making me weird was the infection had got into the inner ear and into this thing called the vestibular nerve of my brain. And it sort of affected all of my eyesight and my hearing. And it was like getting off the waltzers, basically. It's like I just stepped off the waltzers and was spinning around like really badly with vertigo. But it was relentless for a whole week. That was just my existence. I was like gripping the side of like furniture and sort of looking around like there were flies buzzing around my head, feeling like I was going to vomit. And actually last week when I came and presented, that was my state. And I sat here like bright lights, the studio, Ryan's dulcet tones in my earpiece, thinking, I think I'm going to die. I don't think I can do this, and just went onto autopilot and spoke. So that's why I then had to go and lay low for another week to get myself better. I did what any sensible West Country lass would do and went back to the good old Shire. But there you are. I'm better again now, and so thank you ever so much for your patience. Don't know whether you wanted to hear my sob story about my flu, but there you go. You had it anyway. Right, let's get back into the news. Stop me blithering on about Lord knows what when I'm left to my own ends, and instead speak about this, this alleged treaty, this peace deal between Putin and Trump. What does it involve? We don't know. We know there's been a long conversation. We will not accept a peace deal reached without Ukraine, says Volodymyr Zelensky. Well, you'd think so. Yeah, I mean, you can't just sit that one out, can you? The US denies betraying Ukraine after Trump and Putin's phone call. Any so-called peace deal will not stop the Kremlin's warmongering. That's what many experts are warning. Could this be appeasement? Or we don't know what it involves. We all want that war to end, don't we? So someone's got to speak to someone at some point. Maybe it's going to be a good thing. I don't know. Maybe Tobias Ellwood knows. Let's speak to him. He's former chair of the Defence Select Committee. Tobias, I have a feeling, right, if this was Ursula von der Leyen who'd gone to meet Putin, or someone like that, Mark Rutte, let's say, Secretary General of NATO, had gone to meet Putin to say this war's got to come to an end. How are we going to do that? Tried to have a bit of dialogue, build a golden bridge, that famous term I kept hearing bandied about at the outbreak of the war. The media would be going, this is good, this is progress, there's hope, good old Europe. And because it's Donald Trump, everyone goes, well, that's it, that's appeasement then. But we don't know, do we? That's the thing, we actually don't know what's discussed. What do you reckon's going to come to pass?
You're right. To give Trump his credit, he has a convening power that arguably nobody else in the world has. But he's advanced conversations, which has taken everybody by surprise here in Munich at the security conference where I currently am. There's a new political reality here. The US president has struck a deal with the aggressor, and that excludes Ukraine. And this lets Putin, the bully, off the hook. And, there were hints, clearly, that a deal would be possible during the campaign, no doubt about it. And something I agree with, Donald Trump wanted to see NATO states spend more on defense. But what has now emerged has taken everybody by surprise. We now see America intending to set the terms of a Russia-Ukraine deal, but then leave the negotiation table, not wanting to hang around and help implement the very deal that Trump is promoting. And it's also vetoing any NATO involvement in defending Ukraine in the longer term. But the biggest concern I have is America's message that it will dial back its European security commitments to focus elsewhere. And Putin must be looking at this, probably thinking, I could not have asked for a better outcome. Moscow is treated with respect as a superpower again. The US president is giving Russia credibility, and Putin gets to claim a form of victory and is able to fight for another day.
Yeah, I mean, look, I agree with much of what you say, although I would stress again, we don't know what's in this conversation. And if there's one thing that the detractors of Trump say about him is the man's a monster. He hardly has cuddly, nice little deals. His deals are more like, you take back all your, criminal gangs or we're going to whack massive tariffs on you. How do we not know? He said to Putin, right, this war ends now, or B-52s currently stationed at, US Air Force bases in Britain are suddenly going to find themselves hanging around Moscow. One thing we do know about Trump is that he's a pretty tough-talking guy. So one would hope that the deal isn't, oh, well, there you go, Vlad, take what you like and let's just forget all about it. So my problem here is if it's not Trump saying let's get around and negotiate how we end this war, who else is doing it? Because there might be people sitting at the Munich Security Conference berating what Trump is doing, but a lot of those people, a lot of the EU leaders, when Russia first invaded Ukraine, did a whole lot of naff all. They were very slow with sanctions. Germany sat there going, oh, you can't use German weapons, saying to Czech Republic and the like, you can't use weapons that we sold to you and give them to Ukraine. In fact, there were 6 months of messing about where there was no affirmative action other than the UK.
Yes, and I was there calling on the NATO and the European community to support Ukraine more, and Britain, give its due, led the way there. But it's not lost on everyone here in Munich that back in 1938, a previous deal was signed in the city with an aggressor seeking to expand his empire. And here we are again, allowing the bully to win and hoping to avoid further conflict. And there's a huge worry here that history will repeat itself, because what Donald Trump has done is exclude Ukraine, exclude the leadership of NATO, exclude the Baltic countries from where the discussions will go. No one here trusts Putin or believes his aggression will now cease because there's a deal with Ukraine. And I'm sure much of this conference will be about explaining to the Americans, there's a large delegation here, that appeasing Russia will only make the challenge of containing China all the harder, given how close those two countries have now become.
I mean, earlier the US Secretary of State Pete Hegseth was speaking in Brussels at the NATO summit there about Russia and Ukraine. Let's take a listen to what he has to say.
NATO is a great alliance, the most successful defense alliance in history. But to endure for the future, our partners must do far more for Europe's defense. We must make NATO great again. This administration believes in alliances, deeply believes in alliances. But make no mistake, President Trump will not allow anyone to turn Uncle Sam into Uncle Sucker.
I mean, at least he's saying that they believe greatly in NATO. They want Europe to put more into their own defence. You can't really blame America too much for that. It's all very well Europe constantly turning to America and going, oh, please help us. Things have got a bit nasty over here again. I agree with you. Look, outbreak of First World War, outbreak of Second World War. For whatever reason, considering America is largely made up of Europeans back then who came over and inhabited that great country, they weren't very interested. And as a result, because they sort of just sat on their hands, there were two massive world wars, which were then solved when they did decide to enter the battlefield to some degree. I'm just sort of, summarising in a bit of a crude way there. But it does sound to me like, look, he's saying we believe in these alliances. I would hope, therefore, that there can be a discussion. Trump is Trump. He's gone and spoken to Putin. Macron did the same. He sat at the end of that ridiculously large white table. I can't remember the same sort of furore when Macron went to meet Trump and said, oh, how about you stop doing this? And people sort of went, oh, isn't he great, lovely little Emmanuel, because he's one of theirs.
It's different, I'm afraid. Donald Trump, the American president, the leader of the free world, doing a deal with the aggressor and bypassing Ukraine, the country that's been invaded, that is what's got people upset here. And you saw the defense secretary there absolutely rightly saying that European countries should spend more on defense. I've been saying this on your program many, many times. We're stuck at about 2.3%. We need to go up to at least 3-4%. Our world's getting more dangerous, not less. But when he claims that to make NATO great again, I mean, that is just a soundbite taken from the American campaign. It's not going to be great if America backs away from its involvement with Europe. And it's in America's interest that Europe remains strong. And Putin staying in command, able to regroup and rearm and advance its aggression again in a couple of years' time, will weaken Europe, weaken Europe's security, weaken Europe's economy, and that will have a knock-on impact to America as well, and be a distraction from us that should be working with America to contain the growth, the might of China.
No, I agree with you. I mean, the problem is, of course, Putin was appeased by Obama in 2014 with the annexation of Crimea, frankly, was appeased by the EU, appeased by everybody, just saying, oh, well, go on then, you can keep it. So what does a golden bridge look like now? How does Europe find its way out of this? Do we have to ramp up the volume and say to Putin, right, this has become a war of attrition. Instead of trying to end it, let's maximise this, go in hard, go in deep to put you back where you came from? Or is that going to be thought, well, we can't do that because that could lead to a nuclear war? I mean, all I'm hearing is a lot of Trump shouldn't have spoken to him. We don't know what the deal is, but no one's really telling me what the way out of this is.
No, the deal seems to be that Russia walks away with 1/5 of Ukraine, that there is a ceasefire, and those are the terms in which we now move forward, with Ukraine smaller and, from a security perspective, all the more weaker as well. America is refusing to participate in any post-ceasefire support. I think Britain will step forward, but again, to listen to Pete Hegseth say America make NATO great again, when America isn't willing to support Ukraine to make sure that it has the security that it requires, preventing Russia from attacking in a couple of years' time. So what we've done, and you're right to point it out, we blinked on many occasions. We've lost that Cold War statecraft, if you like, about to look our opponents in the eye and not blink, because we've been spooked by the rhetoric from Putin, who's going to say, I'm going to go nuclear. Well, it's a lot more nuanced than that, to be able to push Russia back, to make sure we defend European security and European democracy. And that hasn't happened. And Putin, I'm afraid, goes back to Russia, able to tell his people, look, I've won. I can continue to win. And we're back treated like a superpower again.
But then I'm still not hearing what we're supposed to do here. This is what I'm really struggling with, because first of all, yeah, Trump might have gone to meet Putin and said, look, this is how I think peace could be broken. Europe, Zelensky don't have to go, OK, well, that's it then. That's what we're going to do. Surely we can turn around, or Zelensky can turn around and say, no agreement, no deal here. And if that's the case, then what is the better deal? What do we, I don't understand, until someone can say to me, OK, Putin mustn't get 1/5 of Ukraine. He's not going to go like, oh, well, I'll have nothing then and stop. So what is it? What is the way out?
Well, hang on a minute. We'll have nothing then stop. Yes, you stop the bully or he does it again. Hitler did this in 1938.
And we threaten what to make that happen?
It's going to repeat itself. It's going to repeat itself.
Yeah, well, okay,
so what you do, in answer to your question, let me answer your question because it's absolutely right, is that you give Ukraine the weapon systems that it's been calling for. Every time we've had a debate, whether it be main battle tanks, F-16s or long-range missiles, we've had a public debate as to whether we should or shouldn't give those weapon systems to Ukraine. They are doing the fighting for us in Europe at the moment. And if they lose, if we appease Russia, Putin will not stop there. That's the bigger picture that we need to recognize. This is a war in Ukraine, but it's actually a wider conflict that we're seeing across Europe. And it won't end in Ukraine if we strike a grubby deal now.
Is it simple enough that if the likes of the countries that some may say can afford it, although looking at the state of our economy, I'm not sure how much we can afford, but if the likes of the UK, Germany, France, Italy, Poland, Czech Republic, et al., all went, right, here you go, bam, this is all the weapons you could wish for in the world, go and get them, would it work? Could that work? Or is this just going to drag out the attrition?
Now, you're right, that's a calculation that needs to be made, but our hesitance has allowed Putin to anticipate what we're about to do next. We're still dilly-dallying over whether we should send ATACMS, Taurus, and our Storm Shadow missile systems. There shouldn't even be a public debate about that. That's what Ukraine requires to hit Putin at range in Russia, then so be it. Otherwise, you're just simply helping Putin as well. We could have had a no-fly zone in the same way that we had over Israel, if you remember, that we took out Iranian weapon systems when that country was attacked. And we could do the same over Ukraine as well. We blinked. NATO, yes, it's a massive security alliance, but I'm afraid it's been shown that deterrence has failed when it comes to Putin and him attacking Ukraine. And it won't stop with Ukraine. You mentioned yourself, Crimea, Georgia as well. And we're seeing Eastern European companies drinking the Moscow Kool-Aid, no longer wishing to support Ukraine. We're in very dangerous times here. And this deal that we're seeing come out here is allowing Putin to exist, to continue, and get ever closer to President Xi, who will redesign our global order. That's the scale of what we face today.
Oh, that I have absolutely no doubt. The might of the anti-Western axis is quite something to behold and chills me to the core. But the problem is, I agree with much of what you say, but the problem is there are way too many so-called peaceniks, probably right there in Munich right now, who go, what Trump is doing is terrible. But when you go, right, give them the storm shadows, give Ukraine what they need to really go after Putin and the Russian forces, is people say, well, that's going to escalate things. He will use a strategic nuclear weapon. He's already called in North Koreans to fight this war for him. What if he starts asking the Chinese for some favours and they're finding some people from Xinjiang who are currently in labour camps? Or, you know, the problem is there'll be a lot of people who say this will escalate things and then Lord knows what lies in store. That is the big war that we're worried about. And no one's got a crystal ball and no one can see into the future. And this has been the problem for the beginning with NATO. It hasn't been singing in chorus at all because there are people going, we can't escalate. There are others whose economies are innately tied to Russia for legacy reasons. There are others who, for domestic political reasons, feel like they can't sort of stick the hand in the national coffers and start paying for this because the public don't agree with it. And so we end up with this thing just dragging on.
Yeah, I mean, you summarised the challenges that NATO has endured. It's a consensus-driven organisation. And if everybody then cannot agree, then there needs to be a coalition of the willing. That's what we should have done when we realized that Turkey, Hungary, and other countries weren't going to play ball, weren't going to do the right thing and stand up for democracy in their hour of need. And that's, as I say, gifted Putin time, not only to push back, not only to win terrain in Ukraine, but also for victory. So he can point out and say, it was all worthwhile. We've now expanded the Russian influence yet again. And I promise you, if we agree to some deal now, a couple of years' time, he would have rearmed, regrouped, and he'll do it all over again in another part of Eastern Europe.
Tobias, it's been brilliant catching up. Keep us updated about what's going on at that security conference, because I have a feeling there's going to be plenty of heated conversations in the back corridors. Oh, they'll all make nice when they do their press interviews. We speak in solidarity. We're all together. NATO's never been stronger. And yet all of a sudden you find one country's like, yeah, but we need that Russian gas, don't we? Another one's like, well, you know, didn't Putin send you that really nice bottle of vodka for your birthday? Yeah, he did, didn't he? And then, of course, I mean, Lord knows how many Russian agents are infiltrating various charities and organisations. A huge part of this, actually, a huge part of this. And this is what people massively underestimate about the Russians. They play multi-level chess, like multi-dimensional chess. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples here. One of the reasons Germany was very slow going after Putin with sanctions in the first instance was because they wanted that Nord Stream 2. They already had Nord Stream 1. They wanted Nord Stream 2 because they needed that gas from Russia. Why? Because they've closed all their nuclear power stations. Why? Because over a period of many decades, Russian agents had infiltrated all the green pieces of this world, banging the drum of how dangerous and evil nuclear power is. And all the greenies go out their placards, and all of a sudden, the political establishment crumbles and go, oh, we got to be nice, we better not have nuclear power. Then look what happens. Putin's there. Do you remember the beginning of Have I Got News For You? There used to actually be a cartoon of a Russian man with a big fluffy hat turning a giant tap on a gas pipe. So this isn't brand new information. They've always played this game. Another example of what they do is using the Wagner mercenaries who are everywhere in Africa. They've gone into Niger. Now, this is a country that we never really talk about, but actually Niger has a whole load of uranium. Indeed, a whole load of uranium that France uses to power its nuclear stations, right? Basically, the French nuclear power stations shore up the grid of France, the national grid of France, which itself shores up a lot of the whole of the EU's intertwined energy grid. But they can't get their uranium anymore. Why? Because Russia have essentially created a coup there, and guess who's got the uranium now? Not France. So this is the problem. We keep falling into Russia's trap time and again because we'd rather self-flagellate and, I don't know, put posters on the wall of Greta Thunberg and make critical geopolitical decisions that are just nonsensical. Glad I've got that off my chest. Right, we're going to take a short break now, but after the break, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call if you'd like to be connected to me in the studio and let me know your thoughts. And you can send me a WhatsApp message. You can leave me a voice note on WhatsApp as well. Same number, 0344 499 1000. 8722 on the text. Always write talk, TALK, before your message, or it ends up in, well, I don't know where it goes, but not here. We're on next at talkTV. I'm back after this.
I would go so far as to actually sanction people who are parents who encourage this in their children. You know, I think it's worse than neglectful. I think it is encouraging serious mental health problems. No child or teenager who identifies as an animal is likely to have a happy, balanced, good life, are they?
Yeah.
Hello, I'm turning up for a job interview. I'm going to be a fox today. Would you mind employing a fox? You know, not going to happen really, is it?
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Now, has Rachel Reeves been raiding your bank account? Do you feel the pinch in these hard economic times? Well, don't worry, because you could potentially win £25,000. This is how.
It's competition time, and we're giving you a chance to win a whopping £25,000. So what do you need to do to get involved? All you have to do is text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post. It's as simple as that. Once again, to get involved, just text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post.
18 plus, UK excluding NI. Enter by SMS for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on March the 3rd, 2025. Or send your name, email and contact number to £25,000 cash competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on March the 6th, 2025. This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Look at that. Well, there you go. Good luck if you're entering. Perhaps we should have a competition. Text Alex to win lunch with me or something. And remember to bring your earmuffs, because I might rant at you for a full hour. That doesn't exist, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. That isn't a competition prize. You have to guess my weight instead. Joking. Right. OK, let's do some of your calls. Let's speak to Mark, who is in Bolton. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Alex. Nice to see you back on.
Oh, thank you, my darling. It's nice to be back, actually. I've missed this place.
Yeah.
What do you want to talk about, my love?
The cost of living, basically. I mean, just doing a normal shop at the moment, and I don't know if everyone does it, but when I go shopping, I normally buy roughly the same things.
Yeah.
Every week, you know, like your sausages and and bacon and stuff like that. And my shopping already has gone up by £22 a week.
Yeah, I can well imagine. It's mad, isn't it? We aren't talking about this enough, actually. And, you know, this problem's only going to get worse if we go after the farmers. What is the thing that's going to suffer if we're not producing food? The cost of food. And like I said earlier on, you know, if we're not producing... Look, British-made produce, people go, well, it's cheaper to get this other stuff from somewhere else. But if we really supported our farmers, the actual cost of food would come down if there was more produce. That's very simple mathematics. And my worry is, if anything were to happen, and all of a sudden, you know, cargo carrying beans from Kenya can't get through, or there's, you know, drought in Spain where various vegetables come from, or a big outbreak of bird flu in Italy, or, you know, Lord knows what, then basically we're stuck, aren't we?
Yeah, and I don't understand why this government don't understand it, if that makes sense. I don't understand why they don't get it. They must sit there and just think, right, we've done something wrong here. Farmers obviously produce food. So but I don't think they will backtrack, and the reason I don't think they will is because of Starmer, and he doesn't want to be seen to be what's the word?
He likes being intransigent. He doesn't want to be seen to sort of be weak and be a flip-flopper or a U-turner. You know, he says, no, we're going to stick with it, however unpopular it is. And so he's got his fingers in his ears. He's going, la, 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 wearing his high-vis jacket, running away from the farmers who'd come to have a conversation with him in Buckinghamshire, and looking like the moron that he is. Mark, thank you ever so much for your call. Let's speak now to Graham, who's in Peterborough. Hi, Graham.
Oh, good evening.
Hi.
It's on the farmers' situation.
Great, yeah.
I mean, Starmer is sort of picking on them for a measly paltry sum of £500 million, which is the exact same figure that he is spending on farmers abroad.
Yeah.
It's simple maths.
Yeah.
Don't give the money to the farmers abroad.
It makes no sense, does it? It literally makes no sense.
Crazy.
What he keeps saying is, well, you know, we don't need so much good food here. We need to make sure farming's better somewhere else so we can get the food from there. I mean, like I said, the minute there is a drought or some plague of locusts or mass flooding or, you know, climate change, this or that, or, you know, they just decide they don't want to sell their produce anymore for whatever reason, or a war, or you name it, we haven't got the ability to feed ourselves. And that is so dangerous. And I agree with you. Why are we giving money to these farmers abroad? We should be giving that money to our own farmers. It's basic common sense of how to run a country. Make sure you can feed yourself. Make sure you can defend yourself. Make sure you've got your own energy supply. Make sure you can stand on your own 2 feet and aren't dependent on anything else. Because, the same people, the same politicians said, well, the thing is with inflation, it's because Russia invaded Ukraine. Well, why did that affect us? Oh, that's right, because we have to import a load of wheat from Ukraine.
And the other thing is, Starmer uses the excuse that money from the farmers will go to the NHS, and they will rely on these imports. But as you said, there is an interruption in the supply chain. The only thing that is going to happen is our hospitals are going to fill up with the malnourished.
Well, do you know what's really quite cynical? When I heard earlier that he had apparently said, well, make a decision, farmers or the NHS, farmers or the NHS. I was like, it's not farmers or the NHS, you absolute sicko. Do you know what I would get rid of if I wanted to make sure the NHS had all the money in the world that it needs? I'd get rid of all these blimmin' quangos. I'd get rid of the Senedd in Wales that seems to do naff all. I'd get rid of the Scottish government that does naff all. I'd just be, right, all of this is just waste. All these public sector jobs are money for nothing. It's just a load of people sitting in slankets at home because they can't even be bothered turning up for work, demanding big pensions, demanding expenses, demanding all of these brilliant salaries, public sector pay and all the rest of it. They cost us money and they don't really offer much return on investment. I'd get rid of about a third at the very least, probably 2/3 of all of that rubbish, and say, here you go, guess what? We got fewer people employed in the false economy of paying taxes to be paid from taxes, more money in the real world, and here you go, farmers, farm, baby, farm. That would be the Alex motto in the Alex election campaign. Thank you ever so much, Graham. In Peterborough, right, we're going to take a short break now, but when I come back, I'm going to be talking to a wonderful woman who I absolutely adore, Peggy Grande. She is a former executive assistant to Ronald Reagan, a political appointee in the Trump White House, a Republican from California, author of The President Will See You Now. She's amazing. You don't want to miss it. She's after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Right, let's speak to one of my, I love her, one of my very good friends, Peggy Grande, former exec assistant to Ronald Reagan. Hi, Peggy, how are you?
Hi, Alex. How are you? Always nice to see you.
So good to see you. Do you know, I've only just recovered from inauguritis. I don't know what evil flu was ripping through the events of Washington, D.C., but I was hit hard for 3 weeks. I don't know if you got it.
There were a lot of people that got it. I think it was the frigid cold air that was here and too much time out in it and maybe just having a little too much fun. But it was great to see you here when you visited.
Oh, it's always good to see you. I wish it was more often. Right, let's get to business here. Now, the big story today is the fact that Trump has sat down with Putin and apparently carved up some sort of deal, didn't invite Zelensky to the conversation. They've got a big security conference taking place at Munich right now. The Europeans are up in arms. They say no doubt this is some form of appeasement. Why on earth would Trump go and have this conversation, catching us all off guard in NATO? We don't know what's been said. Sounds as though he's going to say to Putin, here you go, here's your rewards for invading Ukraine. And then turn around and go, right, we're not going to help after that. Putin gets this and you've got to manage all the security yourself and you must pay more into NATO. And the Europeans are going, we can't do this. This is terrible. This is a betrayal. So I wanted to hear from an American perspective what you think of this deal, what Republicans are saying, and actually if the Europeans are actually getting this wrong and misinterpreting what could be a good solution.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you, Alex, of course, for having me on. And it's amazing to me that after all these years, people still don't understand Donald Trump. They don't understand the way he thinks, the way he works, the way he negotiates. He's the author of The Art of the Deal, and we see him making deals in every which way. And the same people who are criticizing him for stepping up and for providing leadership to the situation are the same people who have sat on the sidelines hand-wringing for the last 3 years, watching this all play out. And it's interesting with other conflicts where we watch people like in Qatar get credit for being these great diplomats and negotiating settlements and things. But then when Trump steps in, everybody's up in arms. Trump is not in a position to make a unilateral deal. He started a conversation, which is very important. You can't always talk about people. You need to actually talk to them. And Donald Trump can do it from a position of strength. We saw the weakness that Biden left this mess on the world stage, and Trump is tackling everything with a sense of urgency. He told us that he wanted the fighting to stop on day one. Here it's 3 weeks in, and he's already demanded a call with Putin, and we should be glad that he's talking to him. He's also talking with Zelensky, and he's going to bring them both to the table. He wants the fighting to stop. That is the primary goal of his, and I think we should thank him for taking these steps to make that happen. Well, much of Europe sits back and hand wrings and hand waves about it and hasn't done anything to stop the fighting.
Right, I think that's a very valid comment, and it keeps coming up time and again at the outbreak of this war. When Russia went into Ukraine, the Germans did nothing. Most of Europe didn't want to put sanctions on Ukraine. Most of them didn't want to give weapons. It was the Eastern European countries who border Ukraine and were former members of the USSR who said, oh, you don't know what you're messing with here. We've got to go in. We've got to go in hard. And the Western European nations, other than the UK, were going, wow, because we had all been doing deals with Russia and using their gas, and we thought we could get Putin sitting around the big negotiating table by being nice to him. But he is a tyrannical monster. This is the only concern, though, because we don't know what's in the deal, and I don't want to sort of, spike it as being a good deal by saying that, oh, just because Trump's made it, it's rubbish. I kind of think completely the opposite. The same people who say, wow, this is going to be appeasement, then say Trump is awful. Look at what he's done to Mexico. Look at what he's done to Canada. So I can't imagine he spoke to Vladimir and said, what do you want? Yeah, should we go for a drink afterwards? I'd imagine he was pretty tough talking and pretty brutal with threats, because that seems to be the way he is. He's a tough guy. But the problem is, we had this before under Obama, 2014, when Putin annexed Crimea, and the international community just sort of went, oh, you shouldn't have done that. And then he got away with it. And the concern that we have in Europe is, this is on our doorstep. And we look back to those 2 world wars that emanated from Europe and spiraled out of control. And on both occasions, America had said at the beginning, World War I, World War II, you got to get on with it, Europe. This is your business, not ours. And it didn't go very well for us until actually America got back in. And so I can understand the sort of concern that Europeans also have, and why we feel urgently, wow, we should be like going after them and fighting them. Is it the case that actually Americans and, especially in the Republican Party, are a bit like, no more wars, Europe's got nothing to do with us? Or is this actually we want to solve this and be there for Europe?
Well, absolutely. We would love to be. But just remember whose leadership this started under. And if you remember, Joe Biden actually green lighted this in a way by saying, well, it depends on whether it's a little incursion, then we would take action maybe in one way rather than a full throttle invasion. And so Joe Biden, with his weakness on the world stage, he basically green-lighted this to happen. So now the world is realizing there's a new sheriff in town. Donald Trump is not making a deal with Russia. He's talking with Russia. He's talking with Ukraine, and he wants to get them to the same table to come to some sort of agreement. People like Vladimir Putin only respond to strength. Donald Trump represents strength, he represents an urgency, and he has made promises that he intends to keep. And one of the things that I think is really interesting, especially having worked for Reagan, we always talk about peace through strength. And we know the strength part with Donald Trump, and especially that resonates with people like Vladimir Putin. But we've seldom focus on the peace part. And Donald Trump has made it a priority of his to be a peacemaker. In fact, he said in his inaugural address, I want to be remembered as a peacemaker, as a unifier. And so this is a priority to him. We see it also in the Middle East, his proposals in Gaza, the Abraham Accords that he brought in during his last administration. And so as much as the strength, I think, is understood and accepted by everybody from Donald Trump, I think we really need to look to his heart in this second term. And he truly wants the world to be at peace. He wants everybody to have the opportunity to be prosperous, safe, successful. That's truly what he wants. And so however he can take a hand in ushering that in, whether it's Ukraine and Russia, whether it's the Middle East, I think he wants that to be his legacy. And he's very intentional about that right at the outset of his administration.
I also think what he's saying quite clearly, and has said time and time again when he says you need to put more money into your defence, is come on, Europe, stand up for yourself. You can do this, stand up for yourself. Because it seems to me European leaders going, oh, we don't like Putin. Oh, we're scared of Putin. Oh, if you let him have the Donbass, he's going to come after us next. Please, can you come and fight him for us? And Trump is rightly saying, well, look, the European Union, you're a group of 500 million people, right? We're 300 million. If all of Europe got together and said to Putin, bog off, it would probably work. The problem is Europe doesn't do that. Europe goes, oh, we're so scared of him. Can we have some gas on the side? Oh, Putin's so frightening. We shouldn't send weapons. He might use a nuclear weapon. You know, it's just so discordant. There's no harmony. There's no sensible decision making. There's no affirmative action. And it seems to me Trump is basically grabbing people by the collar and going, you've got to get a grip.
Well, I believe that courage is contagious, and we see Donald Trump being courageous on the world stage, and he's asking other people to join him and be courageous and to stand up to aggressors wherever they are in the world. And Donald Trump is not saying that we won't defend you. It's just saying you have to pay up. You have to have some skin in the game. And perhaps that's why the European Union has not been so forceful, is because they really haven't been all in. When it's your people's tax dollars, when it's your leadership that's sticking their neck out, when it's your administration that is making these forceful claims, then they're backed up by strength. And Donald Trump is just saying, no longer will the American people fund everything. No longer will we stick our necks out when you're not willing to, or put our money into things that you're not willing to do. If you truly value it, you will invest in it. And Donald Trump is calling these leaders to do exactly what they should have been doing all along. The United States has been taken advantage of for far too long. We've allowed ourselves to do it. And so Donald Trump is saying, we're going to settle the balance sheet now, and new sheriff in town, there's a new way of doing business, and you're not going to get things for free. Ask Canada, ask Mexico, ask Colombia, ask all these places, Venezuela. New deals are being made every single day. And personally, I love it. The American people are so enthusiastic because he truly is delivering on his promise to put America first. That does not mean America only. It means America with our allies. But A strong America makes our alliances stronger and makes our enemies more afraid.
I have a feeling there's something more on this that's yet to come out yet. I'm really looking forward to the Doge audit of the Department of Defense when it comes to the money that's gone to Ukraine, what's gone where. And that weird thing, just before leaving office, Joe Biden pardoned basically all of his relatives, not just for things in the past, but for like the whole of futurity. And we know how much Hunter Biden seemed to like doing deals with Ukraine. I just have a feeling something's going to come out in the next few weeks. Do you think I'm right?
I think so. And I always think it's curious when these quote unquote public servants go in with basically no money and then they leave worth tens of millions of dollars and have 5 homes all over the country and have fallen into wealth while they're in public service. And that's truly not the way it should be. And we know that light is the best disinfectant. And we see Elon Musk and Doge causing the roaches to run for the corners because the sunlight of transparency is panicking a lot of people in establishment Washington, and the American people are on his side and cheering them on.
Oh, Peggy, you're beautiful, you're brilliant, you're brave, you're amazing. I just love you so much. Brilliant interview there. Peggy Grande. I know she is one of my besties, but you can see why, can't you? She is so cool to sit with and just have a really good conversation, a glass of wine. And I mean, that woman is hot, right? She's beautiful and brilliant, like I said. I mean, they make them in America that way. Yet right-wing women in America are really like, wow. Have you seen some of these? Sorry, I'm sounding like some sort of pervy man now, but seriously, when you see, like, you know, the appointment for the Attorney General and stuff like that, and you're like, all right, solid. Nice lookers, aren't they, over there, in the American right-wingers? Right, OK, going to take a short break now. And after this, let's end on a high by speaking to you guys. 03444 1000 is the number to call if you'd like to have a chin wag with me. Not in person, sort of via the phone lines, but live on radio. You can use that number as well to send me a WhatsApp or indeed leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 8722, the number to text. Remember to write the word talk before you text. Back after this.
In Oxford, where I live, new buildings go up all the time, and you can always guarantee that within 6 months the scaffolding will be up around them again. It's become very noticeable.
And some of the things that used to look modern, I mean, I know this is going to sound like an old fogey talking, but I mean, I sort of shiver when I go past a Barbican every now and again, occasionally in a taxi around the back of St Paul's. It just looks awful, looks hideous, looks like the worst kind of red brick university that you'd have ever seen.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back. Right, it's your turn now to have your views expressed either from your own mouth or from mine. So let's do some messages first. Michael in Henley. Posh you are, aren't you, living in Henley? I do wonder why there is now never reference to the civil war going on in Ukraine before the Russian invasion. Did the Russian-speaking East Ukrainians welcome the Russians? I have no idea, but any settlement must surely take the wishes of the East Ukrainians into account. Again, it became taboo to even talk about this, but yeah, there were huge problems going on in the Donbass way before Russia invaded the Russian-speaking part of Ukraine, and there were Ukrainians, Russian-speaking Ukrainians, who sided with Russia in this. I think most of them didn't, but there were plenty who did. It's a complex situation, and we never talk about it. That little factoid never comes into the conversation, does it? And here we go. Someone says, Alex, Trump to Hitler. So all the countries you invaded, the genocide you committed, no problem. Keep the land. Let's be friends. Really? Well, no, I agree. You can't just say to someone like Putin, have this, have that. Can you not do it again? Because guess what? He will. The problem I'm having is everyone seems to be saying Trump's deal is going to be bad, but no one's given a blimmin' solution. And that's been the problem from the beginning. Here we go. Jeff has said, I had the flu too and labyrinthitis. Oh, it's grim, isn't it? Couldn't move from my bed without my head spinning and feeling sick. I know it. I sat in here feeling like that last Thursday. Mental. I shouldn't have even come into work. Getting better now. Good. I'm glad to hear it. You get into it. You think, oh, is this ever going to go away? Horrible. Going to watch Gloucester versus Exeter on Saturday. I think you may lose, though. Exeter are 5 wins from 5 in the Cup. Well, we'll see about that. I'm going to go to the Shed and cheer on Gloucester. Is it in the Shed? I don't know. Is it going to be at Kingsholm? But, yeah, Exeter. Right, hi, Alex. It's all very well for politicians to say we should stand up to Russia, but if the nuclear weapons start flying around, these people get into their shelters while the rest of us would be evaporated. Big words from privileged, protected people. Well, this is the thing. This is how Putin works. Every single time the West goes, do you know what? That's enough. He goes, Seeing me Arsenal, seeing this massive, scary, what does he call it? Like Demon 5 or some sort of horrible name, Satan 5 or something, massive missile thing. He pulls it out every time, doesn't he? The big parades, the flags, everyone clapping this weapon. And then everyone goes, oh, well, oh, sorry about that. Sorry, Vlad, your weapons are bigger than ours. This is the problem. I wonder why, if Putin and China are our major enemies, this is from Chris in Newbury, did a Tory government give away our energy security to Russia and our universities and manufacturers to China? This is exactly the blimmin' point. We're like, oh, well, we're scared of Russia. Well, why aren't we using our own gas? And why would, do you know what, we're not going to get gas out anymore. We're going to have to get it from this place and that place. And then, oh, we're really scared of China. Perhaps we should stop buying solar panels from them? Yeah? You know, funding their regime and then going, oh, they scare us, they undercut our economy. These people are bozos running the country. Alex, I think Donald Trump has bypassed the NATO leaders as he has no trust in them, and I don't blame him. None of the European leaders have tried for peace in this war. A very good point. Let's go to the phone lines now and speak to Leslie, who's in Lancashire. Hi, Leslie.
Oh, hi. I'd just like to say the way that our farmers stood up today in front of Keir Starmer, they blocked him in, they weren't rude, they weren't aggressive, they just stood there, they made the point, he couldn't even answer them. He just jumped in his tractor and disappeared. Our farmers are the people who are keeping our country going. We need them. I live in Lancashire. I support them. I will do anything that I possibly can to help.
Here, I agree. I agree with that entirely, Leslie. We really do need to be helping our farmers out. I came up with my own little election under Alex campaign motto, coining a term of Donald Trump. And my little sort of, if I stood for election, it'd be farm, baby, farm. Like I said, you want to know what your enemies' plans are for you. Look at what your enemy's doing. Well, we're producing 60% of what we eat, and the Labour government are like, yeah, that's probably a bit too much. Let's give money to other countries to farm and prevent our farmers from doing it. China's done the complete opposite. China's gone, do you know what, we need to be totally self-sufficient. Bad things around the corner, and if we can't feed our own country, there's going to be trouble. Why? I don't know what they've got up their sleeves. Leslie, thank you for supporting the farmers. Let's quickly speak to Brian in Salisbury. Great place, Salisbury. Hi, Brian.
It is a great place. I was ringing about Rachel from accounts and her expenses on her cards.
Yeah.
I think the Treasury, some of their employees are the HMRC, aren't they?
Yeah.
The HMRC have an investigation department which goes after people who are spending money, and they call it benefits in kind.
Well, they'll come after the likes of you and I, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I had an instance many, many years ago, long before Rachel from accounts was even employed by whoever she was employed by, when I was the manager of a large insurance company, and I was about to retire, and I took my staff out for a pre-Christmas lunch.
And then what happened?
And the trouble I had, and the company had, to get HMRC to accept that it wasn't a benefit in kind.
I have exactly the same. Brian, if I could bore you to death with my battles versus HMRC, it's funny, isn't it? Rachel from accounts found also using the parliamentary credit card to the tune of $4,000 and had to pay it back, and yet there she is running the country's billions, trillions of pounds. You couldn't make it up. Brian, thank you ever so much. Hello.
Hi, Alex. How you doing?
Kev. I'm all right, yeah.
Good. You're a bit better now, yeah?
I've been screaming, shouting, doing funny voices, waving the arms around.
Good to have you back on planet Earth.
Yeah.
I was a bit worried about you the other day.
I was worried about myself, seriously, at one point.
That's good to hear. Good to hear.
I'm back. What you got coming up then?
The truth about furries.
Furries?
You know, these people who dress as animals.
Oh, you mean like this health minister who says you can be a llama?
We're going to do a lot of other stories as well, but I just thought I'd do this one first. The Children's Society yesterday produced a report saying we should be sympathetic towards kids who say they're animals and dress as animals and crawl around on all fours. Now, they're furries. Furries are actually a kind of pretty sinister sex cult, and therefore the Children's Society should not be indulging kids who want to go down that rather dangerous.
I mean, it's bad enough allowing kids to act like they're mentally ill and just going, that's okay. But actually considering that, there's some pedo men out there thinking, oi, oi, that's tasty, that's messed
so we've
up.
reached that. We've been trying to get furries on today, and they put out a sort of APB saying, do not talk to talk. You know, it's like, what have they got to be so secret about? It's really weird. It's really weird. But I discussed with Isabel Oakeshott yesterday, seriously, that indulging these kids, the Children's Society, government-funded reports say, we've got to be sympathetic. You know, if Johnny says he's a fox, he's a fox. No, he's not. And indulging them, even if it's only on a childlike level, indulging these kids, I think